Chapter 9:57. Spiritual Source, see? Everyone was stunned when they heard that. What was that? Only those from the Songhai sect were deep in thought. They knew about the existence of the other sky ruins. They also knew some basic information about the other sky ruins. For example, the spiritual source sea. The spiritual source sea is filled with spiritual chi. It can nourish everything in the world, including countless ferocious beasts. There are many ways to enter and exit the spiritual source sea. It's one of the most difficult checkpoints in the sky ruins. Chen Bufan smiled as the folding fan in his hand returned to its original state. Everyone understood what he meant. However, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect looked gloomy. Although the information was not important, he was unhappy that Chen Bufan had revealed the information so casually. Wasn't this increasing the number of competitors? That's a defiant halberd dragon, an ice and fire snake, an emperor crocodile, and a deep-sea ape? Why is there a sea dragon leopard? Damn it! Why are there so many ferocious beasts in the spiritual source sea? There were many knowledgeable people in the crowd. They recognized the names of the beasts just by looking at a few shadows jumping around in the spiritual source sea. Everyone's expression changed when they heard that. Defiant halberd dragon, ice and fire snake, emperor crocodile, and sea dragon leopard were not ordinary ferocious beasts. If they were in the outside world, they would definitely dominate an area of the sea and kill all living creatures. They would become the overlords of the sea that everyone feared. With so many ferocious beasts gathered in the spiritual source sea, the difficulty level would soar. The exit of the spiritual source sea is not fixed. Sometimes it's just a simple jump. Sometimes it's in the nest of some ferocious beasts. Sometimes it's in the sky. That's why we'll be leaving first. Hurry up. Chen Bufan smiled and stepped into the spiritual source sea with his guards. The moment they stepped into the sea, the ferocious beasts seemed to sense something. The countless beasts in the spiritual origin sea seemed to have sensed something. Instantly, the roars of the beasts echoed throughout the heavens and earth. The reaching heaven states who wanted to take advantage of the chaos turned pale. However, the heaven and earth spirit chi around the spirit source sea is also very abundant. If you're not afraid of being disturbed, you can use it to cultivate. It was at this moment that someone spoke, giving this group of reaching heaven states a clear path. Then, all of Wuzun stepped into the spiritual source sea. Kid, you better find the exit. Then, I'll tear your bones apart one by one and devour your flesh and blood. At this moment, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect turned around and grinned at Tianyang. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled faintly. You should take care of yourself. After that, Tianyang took a step forward and disappeared into the thick fog above the spirit source sea. Eldest young master, let's go. I've explored the spirit source sea a few times, so I'm very familiar with this place. With me here, we'll definitely be the fastest apart from those in the immortality state. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect said. Zhao Haikong, who was beside him, nodded and looked at the direction where Tianyang had disappeared with a venomous gaze. Then, he followed the 14th elder and disappeared into the sea fog. Wuzun's primordial spirit is really useful. The spirit chi in the spirit source sea is terrifyingly abundant. It's the biggest obstacle for other primordial spirits. But at my level, it's just SOSO. Tianyang stepped on the surface of the sea as if it were flat ground. He released his primordial spirit, which instantly covered an area of 5 miles. This place is indeed rich in spirit chi. It's definitely a good place to cultivate in seclusion. However, compared to the other things in the sky market, it's not a good place to stay. Tianyang smiled. At this moment, a splash suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea less than 3 feet away from him. A fierce figure charged fiercely towards Heavenly Sun. Frostfire Snake? Tianyang raised his eyebrows and pointed his finger. Telepathic finger sword. He did not need to move much to deal with such an existence. The primordial spirit combined with the sage state sword principle attacked together. The finger radiance was like a sword, and it chopped off the frostfire snake's head in an instant. The rest of the snake's body twisted in the air and fell to the ground. It was a one-hit kill. Although this frostfire snake is only half a step away from Wuzun, it's not bad to eat, no. Just as Tianyong was about to grill the snake, he raised his eyebrows. His eyes emitted a bright light. A monster in the Wuzun state can be considered a great demon. This group of great demons is definitely not the kind that can stay quietly in the Spirit Source Sea. No matter how big the Spirit Source Sea is, it can't be that big. These great demons control an area that is thousands of miles wide. The Spirit Chi in the Spirit Source Sea alone is not enough to satisfy them. However, they did not die in the fight for the Spirit Source Sea. They are still alive and well. Tianyong's eyes shone brightly. He had caught on to something. Therefore, they must have found the exit and entered the Vientiane Sky Market to obtain the treasures within. Looking for treasures? The Sky Market is not the only option. Tianyong's eyes shone brightly. In the next moment, he threw the frostfire snake into his space bag and plunged into the Spirit Source Sea. Everyone else was trying their best to avoid the beasts and find the exit. However, Tianyong did the opposite. He did not care about the exit and went straight to the beasts to rob them. In the depths of the Spirit Source Sea, in the reverse halberd dragon's cave. Lowly human ant, we did not go out to the sea to kill you and become a part of the sea. Instead, you barged into our cave. Are you looking for death? In the spacious cave, a huge dragon with a black body and white stripes that was more than 100 feet long had a murderous look in his eyes. In the next moment, before Tianyong could reply, he dashed out and opened his mouth to devour Tianyong. However, Tianyong only smiled and punched out. The ancestral dragon's body exploded. The pressure from the bloodline suppressed the reverse halberd dragon. Just as the reverse halberd dragon was in shock, Tianyong disappeared from his spot and appeared in front of him. Human ant, why do you have the ancestral dragon's chi boom? Tianyong punched out and knocked the reverse halberd dragon out of his mind. Then, Tianyong grabbed the reverse halberd dragon's body and used the black tiger steels the heart 13 times. Boom, 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 boom. Due to the suppression of the bloodline, the defiant halberd dragon could not muster up the slightest bit of resistance. It could only allow Tianyong to land punch after punch on its body, shattering many of its scales. Blood spurted out and dyed the entire cave red. Ant, what do you want? Are you going to tell me or not? Tianyong shouted. The reverse halberd dragon was confused. Ant, watch your attitude. Boom! Another punch came crashing over. The reverse halberd dragon felt that he could not keep his teeth. Are you going to tell me or not? Tianyong shouted and waved his fist. Seeing that the reverse halberd dragon was silent, he punched him again. Boom! The reverse halberd dragon's teeth fell to the ground and turned into shiny refining materials. I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to tell me or not? Tianyong shouted angrily. The reverse halberd dragon was not sensible at all. At this moment, the reverse halberd dragon finally had a chance to breathe. His eyes were red as he shouted. Chapter 958. What the F***CK did you ask? The defiant halberd dragon's roar was like a vengeful spirit from hell. Tianyong was stunned. Tears welled up in his eyes. What did I ask? Tianyong muttered to himself. Then, he realized what had happened. He didn't seem to have asked anything before he started fighting. At this moment, Tianyong felt a deep sense of embarrassment. The exit of the spiritual source sea. As Wuzun, who had lived for hundreds of years, Tianyong was still thick-skinned. He lowered his head and said, the defiant halberd dragon was speechless. However, the defiant halberd dragon's expression changed slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Keep talking nonsense. If you continue, I'll punch you again. If you can live for 10,000 years, I don't believe you don't know where the exit is. Otherwise, why haven't I found any corpses in the spiritual source sea? Tianyong sneered. This group of demonic beasts must have enough spiritual energy to survive for 10,000 years and not kill each other. Now that there were no corpses and these demonic beasts were alive and well, they must have found the exit and obtained something from the sky market. A gatekeeper had to be paid, right? You. The defiant halberd dragon's expression changed. He suddenly understood why Tianyang had come to find trouble with him. Everyone was running around in the spiritual source sea like a headless fly and had completely ignored the natural guides of the spiritual source sea. The people in the Shintian great cosmos were still stubborn. They knew that the beasts were gatekeepers, so they fought or ran away. It was the first time Tianyang had tried to obtain information from the demonic beasts. I'm also proficient in the soul-searching technique. Tianyang's casual words made the defiant halberd dragon's expression turn serious. I know. It's at the bottom of the sea, about 20,000 miles northeast of here. The defiant halberd dragon said. However, Tianyang's expression did not change. Instead, he stared at the defiant halberd dragon. Suddenly, the reverse halberd dragon's face changed. What are you trying to do? The scenery at the bottom of the Spirit Origin Sea is the same. I don't know if you're telling the truth or not. If I get lost and you run away, wouldn't I be in an awkward position? So scram. We are the noble kings of the ocean. How could we possibly associate ourselves with a puny human like you? The reverse halberd dragon shouted angrily. Waves of seawater gathered around him as he released his demonic power. However, Tianyang flicked his finger and unleashed his dragon might. The demonic energy turned into a pool of stagnant water, and the surrounding seawater dissipated. Tianyang had cultivated the ancestral dragon physique for so many years. He had also cultivated the dragon might to the realm where he could control it at will. Flood dragon, heavenly dragon, true dragon, divine dragon, ancestral dragon. Although the defiant halberd flood dragon was close to becoming a sky dragon, it was still miles away from Tianyang's ancestral dragon body. Facing the might of the ancestral dragon, it was naturally impossible to resist. The defiant halberd dragon roared. At this moment, Tianyang spoke again. I can't be bothered to associate myself with you. Be my mount, and I'll send you out after I'm done with the loot. Or you can refuse to be my mount, and I'll eat you after I search your soul. It's that simple. Tianyang said calmly, as if he was talking about something insignificant. However, the defiant halberd dragon was terrified when he heard this. It wasn't a super elite. It was just a LV-1 Wuzun. Even though Wuzun was a LV-1 Wuzun, he couldn't even use 50% of his strength in front of Tianyang's ancestral dragon might. Tianyang was definitely not weak. Even though the spiritual source, sea, was his home ground, he couldn't do anything to Tianyang. As for Tianyang, it was very likely that he would be killed. All right, the defiant halberd dragon lowered its head. It preferred freedom over death. It had been 10,000 years. They had been captured to be gatekeepers for 10,000 years. In the past 10,000 years, they had found the exit of the spiritual source sea and obtained some treasures. However, it was too lonely to be accompanied by someone who shared the same fate as them for 10,000 years. It was like being captured to a place that was only 100 square meters in size. There was nothing to eat, wear, and drink. There were only a few people with you. After 10 years, you could play Fight the Landlord with your eyes closed and know what kind of cards they were going to play and how you would end up. The loneliness of knowing everything and not being able to change anything was the most torturous. Even though the defiant halberd dragon was a demonic beast, it was no exception. All right, I, Grandmaster Yang, admire people like you who know how to adapt to the situation. Tianyang smiled when he saw the defiant halberd dragon agree. If the defiant halberd dragon hadn't agreed, Tianyang would have had to put in a lot of effort. He knew how to search souls, but it was extremely troublesome to perform. Furthermore, he might get incomplete information. The defiant halberd dragon's agreement was exactly what he wanted. The exit of the spiritual source sea is indeed about 20,000 miles to the northeast. I'm not wrong about that. However, the spiritual energy in the spiritual source sea has reached a terrifying level. It can even disturb the power of the primordial spirit. No matter how strong the power of the primordial spirit is, it will still affect it and cause it to deviate a certain distance. The defiant halberd dragon said. Tianyang nodded when he heard that. He had sensed this when he was searching for the defiant halberd dragon's cave. 4 Wuzun, who had the power of the primordial spirit in the first, second, and third stages of the primordial spirit. This was a huge problem. However, Tianyang's power of the primordial spirit had reached the level of Wu Zun's primordial spirit. Other than a little disturbance, the spiritual energy could only nourish him. However, other people are probably still looking for the exit. Since you have already taken things from the heavenly market, then you should know where the other ferocious beasts live, right? Tianyang narrowed his eyes, revealing a faint smile as he spoke. The defiant halberd dragon's face changed when he heard that. Not only was this guy targeting him, but he was also targeting others. Don't worry. If they are your friends, just hand over the treasures. If it is not necessary, I am too lazy to kill them. Tianyang smiled. The defiant halberd dragon nodded when he heard that. Then, he carried Tianyang through the spiritual source sea. Damn it, defiant halberd dragon. How dare you betray us and join the human race? Human race die. Boom. Crackle, crackle, crackle. The sound of electricity was heard. The giant crab was cooked, and it gave off a fragrant smell. Tianyang, on the other hand, casually devoured it and looted all the treasures in the giant crab's cave abode. You are the defiant halberd dragon? Who is this behind you? Master Yang. Master Yang, who came from the outside and can take us out. That's all you have. Boom. Bang, bang, bang. Boom. Master, please spare my life. As the man and the defiant halberd dragon traveled through the spiritual source sea, the cave residences of countless powerful beasts were plundered. Some were eaten, some were recruited, and some ran away. As time passed, a large army gathered behind Tianyang. It was made up of the beasts in the Wu Zun realm. Chapter 9:59. In the spiritual source sea. All kinds of huge, ferocious beasts were shuttling back and forth on the seabed. They were like an invincible, terrifying army that obeyed all orders. In front of the beasts was a young man riding a Wu Zun realm defiant halberd dragon, who was hundreds of feet long. He was heading towards a corner of the spiritual source sea. The spiritual source sea looked huge, but it was only tens of thousands of miles wide. However, there were illusory arrays on the surface and in the sky above the spiritual source sea. If one walked on the surface or flew in the sky, they would never be able to find the exit of the spiritual source sea. The person who set up this illusory array must be a 7th level or even a saint level array master. Tianyang exclaimed. Although the illusory array was called an illusory array, it actually involved the power of space or even the law of space. The law of space was superior to power. The profound meaning was equivalent to a way. Only a saint had the power to control the law of space. Tianyang also knew what the minor saint alchemist he saw in the myriad pill tome was. It was a 7th level alchemist. However, it was much more powerful than the average 7th level alchemist. To become a minor saint alchemist, one was already one step away from becoming a saint alchemist. At the very least, one had to comprehend a trace of the holy way. The reason why Tianyang could refine the heaven spirit Xian pill in just a few tries was because of the holy way. Master, how are you going to get us out of here? At this moment, the defiant halberd dragon under Tianyang suddenly asked. Freedom was more important to these monsters than their lives. Trapped in the spiritual source sea, which was only tens of thousands of miles wide, these monsters were about to go crazy. They could only sleep to pass their days. Now that they heard that an expert who was far more powerful than them was willing to take them out, they were naturally overjoyed. Who wouldn't believe it? If they didn't believe it, they would beat them until they did. If they still didn't believe it, they would have to kill them and eat them. Heavenly Sun possessed the undying bloodline and would not reject any essence, Yuan Qi and other essences. This group of great demons were the best flesh and blood medicine. Tianyang killed them and didn't eat them. It was a waste. When I come back, if I see that they can open the spatial gate, I will blast them open and take you all away. If they can't open it, or if there's a limit to what they can do, I'll cut it open myself. Tianyang said casually. With the divine implement in his hand and the divine path in his heart, it was not difficult for Tianyang to cut open a space door in this small world. Thank you, Master. Hearing this, The halberd dragon nodded gratefully. He knew Tianyang's strength very well after a few hours of fighting. The battle was like a perpetual motion machine. His Jinyuan seemed to be limitless, and as soon as it was depleted, it would turn into a vortex that devoured spiritual energy, turning the surrounding spirit origin sea into a vacuum. Even if he was injured, it would not last for more than a few seconds. The strange flame only needed to burn the wound for a few seconds before it would automatically heal the wound. If such a terrifying existence couldn't break through the Vientiane sky market and open the space door, they would be in despair. We're just taking what we need. You shouldn't be angry that I've taken your treasures, right? Tianyang chuckled. The martial, honorable realm, ferocious beast behind him scrambled to answer him. Of course, the treasures are destined by the heavens. Master Yang is wise and powerful. The treasures naturally belong to him. We're just safekeeping them for him. What treasures? I didn't get any treasures. Master Yang is a genius. The final winner of the Vientiane sky market will definitely be him. What are our treasures worth? We don't even have enough proof of allegiance. The beasts exclaimed in admiration. Their expressions were as hypocritical as they could be. They didn't know what admiration was in the human world. They could only suck up to Tianyang with smiles that were uglier than crying. Otherwise, their heads would be smashed by the Dragon Emperor's divine fist and then eaten by the true flames of destruction. Master, there's someone ahead. At this moment, the defiant halberd dragon's expression changed and his tone became serious. Tianyang had been looting in the spiritual source sea for a long time and hadn't seen a single human. Now that they were near the exit, they suddenly appeared. Could it be that someone had found the exit? How many? Tianyang asked. The defiant halberd dragon quickly replied. Only two. One is Wu Zun Realm LV2, and the other is Wu Zun Realm LV1. The LV1 seems to be injured. Wu Zun Realm LV2. Tianyang raised his eyebrows and thought of someone. He smirked and said to the beast behind him, "Stay back a little. The defiant halberd dragon and I will go and meet those two." After entering the Vientiane sky market, everyone was an enemy. The powerful demons craved freedom. Since Tianyang could open the door, they were naturally willing to follow Tianyang temporarily. However, most of the humans who could enter had their own trump cards and wanted to fight for treasures. Naturally, they were enemies and not friends. 14th Elder, there's someone. Just as Tianyang rode the defiant halberd dragon forward, the two people near the exit suddenly felt a sense of danger, and one of them spoke. I sensed it. D***. We searched for a long time before we found the exit. Could there be someone else, like us? The 14th Elder of the Shanghai sect's face darkened. Wu Zun Realm LV2 was the 14th Elder of the Shanghai sect. As for the injured Wu Zun Realm LV1, he was naturally the eldest young master of the Shanghai sect, Zhao Haikong. Tianyang's primordial spirit was much stronger than the two of them. Naturally, he discovered their identities immediately. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Tianyang smiled. In the next instant, the defiant halberd dragon sped up and appeared in front of the two demons in an instant. Who are you? The 14th Elder of the Shanghai sect shouted. Wu Zun's true origin, which was at LV2, exploded and a thick hammer that was 3 to 4 people's length appeared in his hand. It's you. Zhao Haikong's pupils constricted as he looked at Tianyang, who was riding on the defiant halberd dragon. He said in disbelief, "Why are you here?" So it's the guy who injured the eldest young master. The 14th Elder of the Shanghai sect's face changed. Then he sneered. There's a path to heaven, but you chose to barge into hell instead. I wanted to finish you off in Sky Market. I didn't expect that I would have a chance to kill you in the spiritual source ocean. The 14th Elder of the Shanghai sect sneered. In the next instant, he dashed out. Lightning flashed on the giant hammer as it smashed toward Tianyang. Someone is going against Master Yang. At this moment, the defiant halberd dragon suddenly roared. What? Who dares to go against Master Yang? You're courting death. I haven't killed for a long time. Am I going to see blood today? In an instant, shouts came from all over the spiritual source ocean. In the next instant, The 14th elder of the Songhai sect had only swung his giant hammer halfway when he realized something. Around him, Emperor Crocodile, Defiant Halberd Dragon, Ice Fire Snake, Sea Dragon, Leopard, Deep Sea Ape, Song Long, Whale, Earth Engulfing Shark, Sea Dragon, countless monsters, big and small in size, surrounded him. Chapter 960. What's going on? Zhao Haikong was dumbfounded when he saw countless powerful demons gathering around them. They looked ferocious as if they were going to devour them. Just now, the Defiant Halberd Dragon seemed to have shouted something. Then, there were so many powerful demons here. You are the one who wants to attack Master Yang. At that moment, the most powerful rank 2 Martial Honorable, the Emperor Crocodile, stared at the Songhai sect's 14th elder, who was in an awkward position, with a ferocious look on his face as he said, "Are you not putting me in your eyes?" This powerful demon, although the 14th elder of the Songhai sect might be able to defeat the Imperial Crocodile, he was still panicking when he was surrounded by so many powerful demons. What's the conflict between us? Can we sit down and talk about it? The 14th elder of the Songhai sect asked in a hoarse voice as beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead. It had nothing to do with anything else. The situation was too scary. Although the Imperial Crocodile was the only LV2 Wuzun among all the powerful demons in the spiritual source sea, the other powerful demons were not to be underestimated. For example, the Defiant Halberd Dragon under Tianyang had improved tremendously after Tianyang had given it a drop of dragon blood. It had reached the peak of LV1 Wuzun. It had jumped from a middle-level powerful demon to one that was second only to the Imperial Crocodile. A powerful demon of this level was enough to cause trouble for the 14th elder of the Songhai sect. With the addition of the Imperial Crocodile, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect would have a hard time dealing with them. Moreover, there were countless ferocious beasts eyeing them. Conflict. The green scales of the Imperial Crocodile emitted rays of blood-red light. Do you think I'm blind or stupid? Do you know what crime you've committed by attacking me, Grandmaster Yang, in front of us? The Imperial Crocodile's face was ferocious as it opened its bloody mouth. Its fangs reflected a ferocious glint. The murderous intent in its eyes was undisguised. The deep-sea ape, the sea dragon leopard, the ice fire snake, and the other great demons also surrounded them. It was as if they were going to drown the 2 people from the Songhai sect in the sea of great demons if they didn't agree. Master Yang? Could it be that you're talking about this, young man? Songhai sect's 14th elder immediately realized that something was wrong. He looked at Tianyang, who was leisurely riding on the Defiant Halberd Dragon, in disbelief. What kind of charm did this kid have? He actually had so many great demons stand up for him. That's right. The Emperor Crocodile sneered. You're not stupid. Now, I'll give you 2 choices. One is to kowtow and apologize to Grandmaster Yang, and then scram far away. The other is to test just how rusty our claws have become after not fighting for 10,000 years. Ferocious beasts that could cultivate to Wuzun were not ordinary beasts. They had killed countless people. Even if they hadn't fought for 10,000 years, the battle instinct hidden in their blood would not be lost. If Songhai sect's 14th elder really wanted to fight them, they would let him know. Why were the flowers so red? Damn it! What did this guy give you to make you obey him so easily? Zhao Haikong finally couldn't take it anymore and said angrily, "What?" Hearing that, a deep-sea ape that was as tall as a 10-story building said, "He beat us to our knees and gave us freedom. Is that enough?" Freedom? Zhao Haikong was stunned and looked at Tianyang with disdain. He can give you freedom? Why don't you join the Songhai sect? Only the Songhai sect has the power to give you freedom. Zhao Haikong said arrogantly. Hearing that, the Emperor Crocodile's eyes flashed. They naturally wouldn't follow Tianyang sincerely. To these beasts, whoever fed them was their mother. As long as they could be free, was it important whether or not he was Tianyang? However, they trusted Tianyang because of Tianyang's terrifying battle strength. The Emperor Crocodile couldn't use its full strength because of its bloodline, but the deep-sea ape was different. It wasn't much weaker than the Emperor Crocodile. It was an old beast in the spirit source sea. The deep-sea ape bloodline in its body wouldn't be suppressed by Tianyang's ancestral dragon bloodline. Even so, it was beaten up like a dead dog by Tianyang. Once Wu Zun's fifth-stage primordial spirit was released, the deep-sea ape's movements couldn't be hidden. Once the ancestral dragon body was released, the deep-sea ape wouldn't be able to break through without 180 punches. After breaking through the defense, the undying bloodline would show them what despair was. Moreover, Tianyang didn't just have a strong defense. Once the all-heaven sword was used, the deep-sea ape would shave its fur for free. The thin layer of fur on its body was just newly grown. Then, can you beat me? Can you torture this guy? The Emperor Crocodile asked. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect was stunned. What the hell was going on? Weren't they talking about freedom? If it's you, it's more difficult to deal with. It's 50-50. As for torturing Wu Zun, who's a peak first-stage realm. Furthermore, this is your home ground in the spirit source sea. You think too highly of me. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect spoke the truth cautiously. Then there's nothing more to say. Kowtow or be beaten to death. The Emperor Crocodile smiled disdainfully. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect turned pale. Did he say something wrong? Could this Tianyang do something that even he couldn't? The 14th elder of the Songhai sect was about to speak when the deep-sea ape glared at him fiercely. A chill ran down his spine. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. The reverse halberd dragon said, Don't hit me. I'll kneel down now. The 14th elder wanted to be tough, but Zhao Haikong couldn't withstand the pressure from the countless first-stage realm beasts and knelt on the ground. He kowtowed 3 times to Tianyang. Master Yang, please let me go. It's my fault. On the other hand, the 14th elder looked at the group of great demons and then at Tianyang, who had an indifferent expression on his face. A light flashed in his hand. It was a space-piercing talisman. However, he only had one space-piercing talisman. Obviously, it wasn't enough to use here. All right, Master Yang, this time it's my fault. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect gritted his teeth. Then, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times before standing up. Tianyang's expression was indifferent from the beginning. The surrounding ferocious beasts also dispersed their auras. All right, you gatekeepers of the spirit source, see, won't be able to stay for long. Stay here and wait for orders. Hit anyone you see, but don't kill them. I'll take my leave first. Tianyang said casually. Then, he left the reverse halberd dragon and headed for the exit dozens of miles away. Behind Tianyang, dozens of Wu Zun realm beasts spoke. Farewell, Master Yang. In less than 10 seconds. Chapter 961. In the blink of an eye, Tianyang leaped through the well-hidden space exit and arrived at another space. He inhaled a mouthful of dry and abundant spiritual qi. Indeed, this is where the real sky market is. Although the spiritual qi in the spiritual source, sea, was abundant, it had been deliberately turned into seawater. Although the spiritual qi here had not turned into liquid, it was not much less abundant than the spiritual source sea. However, there is a formation blocking the way as soon as I enter. Is the Thousand Creation Saint of Formation Master? Tianyang raised his eyebrows and looked at the sea of clouds around him. The Great Cloud Formation. Tianyang recognized the type of array at a glance. It was one of the simplest array formations among all the array formations he had. However, being simple didn't necessarily mean that it was weak. The Great Misty Cloud Formation set up by a 7th rank array master was also capable of trapping a reaching heaven state and a martial venerable. The primordial spirit power is not very useful. However, although the Great Cloud Formation is different, they all lead to the same goal. As long as I break the clouds, everything will be easy. Tianyang's lips curled up as the Great Void Sword embryo appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he used the secret air stepping technique and turned into a ray of light, dashing forward. At this moment, he was the first to enter the sky market. However, those who came after him might not be any slower. Without his restriction, the group of demons would not stay there obediently. When the time came, the Songhai sect, the immortality state, and other practitioners would definitely enter. Tianyang had to seize every second to obtain the best treasures in the sky market. True flames of destruction burn the world. The clouds and mist seemed endless. No matter how Tianyang flew, it did not change at all. Therefore, Tianyang frowned. The true flames of destruction appeared in his hand and turned into a pitch-black flame the size of dozens of people. The surrounding clouds and mist instantly turned into water droplets and dissipated. Tianyang dashed out at this moment. The primordial spirit power took the opportunity to expand and found the main body of the formation. Then, following the formation patterns, he left the Great Cloud Formation. So tiring. Tianyang muttered to himself as he landed on the ground again. The Great Cloud Formation was extremely difficult to break. Tianyang did not hesitate to use the Great Void Sword Embryo, the true flames of destruction, and the primordial spirit power to get out in such a short time. If it was someone else, they would have been lost. However, Tianyang's primordial spirit power's there were some treasures inside the Great Cloud Formation. It was just that there were very few of them. It was estimated that the demonic beasts were only active in the Spirit Origin Sea and the Great Misty Cloud Formation. However, there are still benefits, after all, of the Great Cloud Formation. Heavenly Sun looked at the purple meteoric metal hovering in the air, like a small sun with a hint of joy on his face. Purple meteoric iron is a good material for refining weapons. It can be used to refine supreme-grade spirit weapons, but it can also be used as an auxiliary material to refine half-saint weapons and even sage weapons. The Great Void Sword Embryo has not evolved for a long time. If it eats this purple meteoric iron, it will at least become stronger. Tianyang smiled and dashed toward the purple meteoric iron that was glowing like a small sun. However, at this moment, an incomparably hot pillar of light suddenly shot out from the cloud array, viciously attacking Heavenly Sun. Tianyang was alarmed. He slashed out with his sword and scattered the light beam. However, the purple meteoric iron that was like a small sun flew away. All treasures had spirits. The purple meteoric iron was not of a low grade. Naturally, it could sense danger and avoid danger. It is indeed better to be prepared. My Songhai Sect's supreme-grade spirit weapon, the Great Sun Mirror, is the nemesis of this Great Cloud Formation. You didn't expect this, did you? That group of demonic beasts dispersed automatically after you left. There was no obstruction at all when we entered this place. An old and arrogant laugh sounded. Upon hearing this, Tianyang's expression froze. A cold look appeared on his face. Previously, he was only one step away from obtaining the purple meteoric iron. However, because of this guy's attack, he missed the opportunity. At this moment, beams of light shot out from the Great Cloud Formation. An old man and a young man walked out of the Great Cloud Formation. They were the 14th elder of the Songhai Sect and the first young master of the Songhai Sect, Zhao Haikong, who had found the exit of the Spirit Source Sea. At this moment, the two of them looked at Tianyang with eyes full of hatred and murderous intent. After all, Tianyang had let that group of demonic beasts force them to kneel and kowtow in apology. It was as if they had thrown their faces to the ground and stepped on them over and over again. If not for the fact that no one knew, they would have taken action immediately. However, even if no one knew, their desire to kill Tianyang did not weaken at all. On the contrary, as time passed, they became stronger and stronger. Now, there are not so many demonic beasts who have lost their minds to come and save you. The 14th elder of the Songhai Sect laughed maniacally. He kept the dazzling mirror in his hand back in his space bag and replaced it with a giant hammer. It shone with the power of endless thunder. Die for this old man. The 14th elder of the Songhai Sect stepped on the wind and thunder, and his speed soared to the extreme in an instant. The hammer, which was surrounded by thunder, smashed toward Tianyang. Scram! The purple meteoric iron was forced to flee because of these two people. Tianyang's mood could be said to be extremely bad. The Great Void Sword Embryo in his hand was merciless as he slashed out. The secret technique of 7 stars, 5 stars shone brightly. The power of Wu Zun's level 5 primordial spirit was released, and the stars were strangled. The ancestral dragon body and the 108 ancestral dragon tattoos erupted with enormous dragon power. The ancestral dragon emperor sword, the divine wilderness heaven spirit art, was activated crazily, and the endless spirit sea was fully opened. The true flames of destruction burned fiercely. At this moment, Tianyang also used the origin of 10,000 swords. Boom! At this moment, Tianyang was extremely furious. Naturally, he did not show any mercy when he attacked. Stubborn resistance. Thunder extermination demon. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect roared and smashed the giant hammer in his hand. Boom! The dazzling sword light was released along with the crisp sword hum of the Great Void sword embryo. At the same time, the attack from the primordial spirit also landed on the 14th elder of the Songhai sect. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect trembled, and his movements slowed down for a moment. The sword light also landed on the giant hammer. The energy ripples swept out, and the space shook. The ground beneath their feet cracked inch by inch. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect could not withstand this furious strike. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. How is this possible? Zhao Haikong was completely stunned. The dignified 14th elder of the Songhai sect could not even withstand a single sword strike from Tianyang. Brat, die. In midair, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect raised his giant hammer again and smashed it down on the sword light. Bolts of lightning were like the might of heaven and earth. However, Tianyang frowned. He circulated his inner yuan, and the sword light shone in Xinguang once again. Get lost. Boom! The 14th elder of the Songhai sect stared in shock. The hammer that he had swung exploded in an instant, and cracks appeared on the giant hammer itself. The sword light arrived in front of him and pierced through mercilessly. Whoosh! An extremely thin line of blood appeared from the top of the 14th elder of the Songhai sect from the top of his head to between his legs. Then, the line of blood suddenly ruptured. Chapter 962. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. Some of it even landed on Zhao Haikong's face. Zhao Haikong was dumbfounded. What was going on? Tianyang had only struck once with his sword, and his body seemed to be glowing with some kind of light. The 14th elder's full-powered hammer strike had sent him flying. The 14th elder had also been sliced in half from top to bottom by the same sword. Plop! Fresh blood splattered all over Zhao Haikong's body. Zhao Haikong's clothes had turned blood red, and he finally understood something. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect was infamous in the eastern sky continent. He was the 14th elder who had shaken the entire Anbei city. He was dead. This, Zhao Haikong's legs were trembling, and his face was extremely pale. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect had actually died. That was Wu Zun, an expert in the second level of the Wu Zun realm. You actually have a substitute talisman. Consider yourself lucky. Tianyang glanced coldly at the 14th elder of the Songhai sect, who had been sliced in half, and snorted coldly. He then executed the Void Step secret technique and chased after the purple meteorite iron. Compared to the opportunities in this sky market, the 14th elder was obviously insignificant. Tianyang had originally wanted to use him to test the limits of his strength. However, after witnessing this scene, he reckoned that he would not be able to do so. Even Tianyang himself did not know how strong he was. His current estimate of his strength was based on the battle results of the battle with the Demon Emperor 3 years ago. Back then, he had only been at the peak of the half-step Wu Zun realm, but he had been able to kill the Demon Emperor. His strength was close to that of an ordinary first-level Wu Zun realm. 3 years later, he was already at the first level of the Wu Zun realm. His strength had not simply skyrocketed. Even Tianyang himself did not know how strong he had become. Was he at the second level of the Wu Zun realm? Was he at the peak of the second level of the Wu Zun realm? Or was he at the third level of the Wu Zun realm? Nobody knew. Substitute talisman? What is it? It wasn't until Tianyang was far away that Zhao Haikong regained his senses. At this moment, beside him, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect had been cut into two halves. His blood was flowing all over the ground. Suddenly, a dazzling light shone. Then it covered his entire body, enveloping him within. Zhao Haikong subconsciously narrowed his eyes. He seemed to see a talisman full of mysterious runes burning in the air. When the talisman was completely burned, the light also dissipated. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect, who had been split into two halves and could not be more dead, suddenly stood up. What? Zhao Haikong was scared silly. A person who had been cut in half could still come back to life? What kind of demonic art was this? Damn brat. He actually made me use up an incomparably precious substitute talisman. The 14th elder, who had come back to life, did not pay attention to Zhao Haikong's actions. Instead, he stared in the direction Tianyang had left and gritted his teeth. For this substitute talisman, I spent a total of 3 million Earth Spirit crystals to obtain it. In the end, I used it up for a brat at the first level of the Wuzun realm. The 14th elder said angrily. Then, he looked at Zhao Haikong, who had almost lost control of his bladder, and his eyes revealed a trace of anger. Get over here. You don't look like the imposing manner of the Songhai sect at all. Yes, yes. Zhao Haikong trembled all over as he walked to the 14th elder's side. Then, the 14th elder suddenly slapped Zhao Haikong's face. Slap. The 14th elder of Songhai sect's slap was powerful and heavy. Even an ordinary person at the first level of the Wuzun realm would not be able to withstand it, let alone an injured and defenseless Zhao Haikong. Elder, why did you? Zhao Haikong was sent flying by the slap. He spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with his teeth. He looked at the 14th elder in disbelief. Cut the crap. I have used this substitute talisman, and my vitality has been greatly damaged. It will be difficult for me to recover. Now, you are my vitality supply machine. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect said with a ferocious expression. Don't worry, I will not borrow your vitality for nothing. After I kill that brat, I will push the credit to you. But for now, you'd better stay there. In the next moment, the 14th elder's right hand suddenly twisted to a degree that no ordinary person could do and grabbed Zhao Haikong's head. Zhao Haikong's face was filled with disbelief. However, a suction force exploded from the 14th elder's palm. Zhao Haikong's body gradually shriveled up. A figure was shuttling back and forth in the sky market. In front of this person, a dazzling object was moving at an extremely fast speed. It was getting closer and closer to him. Treasures have spirits, but their spirituality isn't that strong. This purple meteorite iron can only run in a straight line. Tianyang smiled as he looked at the purple meteorite iron that was getting closer and closer. He used all his movement techniques and secret techniques. In an instant, he arrived in front of the purple meteorite iron and grabbed it in his hand. It's so heavy. It is indeed a supreme-grade refining material. The moment Tianyang grabbed the purple meteorite iron, he felt as if he had grabbed a mountain. Even with the strength of the ancestral dragon body, he almost couldn't hold it firmly. Even the ancestral dragon body almost couldn't hold it. It was obvious that the purple meteorite iron was terrifyingly heavy. The purple meteorite iron was only the size of a palm. Its density was simply terrifying. Just as Tianyang grabbed the purple meteorite iron and was about to put it into his space bag, a shocking light suddenly bloomed in the surroundings. What's going on? Is someone setting up a formation? Tianyang's expression changed instantly. He put the purple meteorite iron into his space bag. Light flashed in his hand, and the all-heavens sword appeared. The great void sword embryo needed time to devour materials and weapons. During the devouring period, the power of the great void sword embryo would be greatly reduced. If there was any danger, it wouldn't be able to deal with it. However, Tianyang didn't feel any danger as he was bathed in the light. Instead, his expression turned serious as he sensed the unusual power in the light. This power is the sage path. As time passed, more and more powerful figures found the exit and stepped into the sky market. At the same time, more and more people were able to see the shocking pillar of light. That is, the group of Wu Zun was puzzled. They didn't know what the light pillar meant. However, the expression of a middle-aged man with a folding fan changed drastically the moment he saw the light pillar. The aura of a rank 3 martial honorable exploded out from his body. Immortality Realm, Wu Zun's level 3, and Chun Bufan. The guard beside him also released Wu Zun's peak level 1 cultivation. Why is the inheritance of the 10,000 elephant saint activated in advance? Chun Bufan's pupils shrank to the extreme as he said in disbelief. In the next moment, Chun Bufan led the guard and charged toward the light pillar. The other Wu Zun followed suit. Within the light pillar, Tianyang stared in disbelief at the object that was slowly appearing in front of him. It was only level 9, but it was like a flight of stairs that led to the heavens. It released rays of light that illuminated the world. Chapter 963. 9-Step Stairway to Heaven. Tianyang was shocked as he looked at the stairway in front of him. Although the stairway in front of him was definitely more than 9 steps, its appearance, aura, and power were exactly the same as the 9-step stairway to heaven that Tianyang had seen in the Tianshao Great World. The 9-step stairway to heaven indeed came from another world. In the Northern Wilderness secret territory, the 9-step stairway to heaven. Tianyang had tempered his body over and over again and had even obtained the heaven-class mid-class martial technique, the Devouring Heaven Seal. He had even rebuilt his body there and obtained the Nirvana spiritual pool to further strengthen his body. It could be said that the 9-step stairway to heaven had brought Tianyang immeasurable benefits. Who would have thought that Tianyang would see the 9-step stairway to heaven again here? However, the 9-step stairway to heaven this time was far more than just 9 steps. There are probably tens of thousands of steps. Could this be the complete version of the 9-step stairway to heaven? Tianyang was deep in thought. At this moment, he suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air. In the next moment, a handsome middle-aged man with a folding fan and Wu Zun, who looked like an old servant, came to Tianyang's side. However, the two of them did not even look at Tianyang. Their eyes were fixed on the stairway to heaven as they mumbled to themselves. Indeed, it's right. This is indeed the inheritance left behind by the 10,000 elephant saint. There is a path to becoming a saint. Other than the inheritance, there is nothing else. The middle-aged man with a folding fan, Chun Bufan, mumbled to himself. The excitement in his eyes was almost overflowing. Although the 10,000 elephant saint was a relatively weak saint, he was definitely not someone that Wu Zun could compare to. According to the information obtained by the Immortal Realm, the 10,000 elephant saint's inheritance could be found in the Vientiane Sky ruins. However, this was just a guess. As Wu Zun, Chun Bufan was only 300 years old and was considered one of the strongest geniuses among the Immortal Realm. Today, he had traveled tens of thousands of miles to the Vientiane Sky ruins just for the sage's inheritance. Step onto the saint path. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. So the name of this flight of stairs is called the Path to Sainthood? That made sense. The 9-step stairway was named after the people of the Northern Wilderness region saw that there were 9 steps to the 9-step stairway. It was definitely not the original name. Moreover, there was a faint aura of the divine path emanating from it. It was appropriate to call it the Saint's Road. Someone's there? At this moment, Chun Bufan finally noticed Tianyang's presence. His expression changed abruptly as he turned to look at Tianyang. This is the kid who offended the Songhai sect? To think that he's still alive, that's incredible. When Chun Bufan saw Tianyang's strangely young face, he heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, it wasn't the 14th elder of the Songhai sect or the other two. He had just broken through to Wu Zun's level 3 and hadn't fully digested it. If he encountered the 14th elder of the Songhai sect, he might have to fight a tough battle. At that time, he would cry to death if someone else took advantage of the situation. However, this strangely young kid, who might not even have stepped into the Wu Zun's level, was obviously not a cause for concern. The path of the 10,000 creation saint is the path of 10,000 creations. It's an extremely powerful path. Although the 10,000 creations saint has only comprehended a small portion of it, it's enough for him to become a saint. If I, Chen Bufan, obtain the path of the 10,000 creation saint, I might be able to consolidate my cultivation level immediately. I might even be able to take the path of 10,000 creation saint and step into the saint realm. Chen Bufan's face was filled with excitement. In the next moment, he rushed towards the heavenly stairway. However, bang! Chen Bufan seemed to have crashed into a tough wall. He couldn't resist at all and was sent flying back. However, Wu Zun's level 3 was Wu Zun's level 3 after all. He wasn't injured at all. However, this collision seemed to have activated something. The path of sainthood instantly shone brightly and dazzlingly. This is the path of 10,000 creations saint's path that had only been a sliver of path of 10,000 creations saint's path had suddenly increased to a terrifying level. Even if Tianyang didn't try to sense it, he could still feel the terrifying pressure. Chen Bufan instantly knelt on one knee. His face was filled with shock and horror. At the same time, he spoke excitedly. The sacred path of 10,000 creations. This is the power of the sacred path of 10,000 creations. This is indeed the place of inheritance of the 10,000 creations saint. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Countless Wu Zun had also arrived at this place. Each and every one of them was stunned by the terrifying path of 10,000 creations saint's path. Those who were slightly closer were forced to kneel on one knee like Chen Bufan. Even those who were far away couldn't help but feel the pressure and bend their backs. What's going on? Some people were shocked. In the eyes of ordinary cultivators, Wu Zun was an indomitable and terrifying figure. In fact, most Wu Zun didn't have a powerful background. They might not even get to see a saint fight, even once before the end of their long lives. Wu Zun was strong enough to dominate some small states. The peak Wu Zun had a place even in the vast divine land. However, only saints were the rulers of the divine land. Only those who were above the saint realm were the true masters of this world. Most people couldn't sense the terrifying path of 10,000 creations saint's path. In the distance, an old man and a young man looked at Tianyang with murderous intent. They were the closest to the path of 10,000 creations saint, but he didn't bend at all. If Tianyang saw these two people, he would definitely be shocked. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect, who was killed by him and saved by the substitute talisman, looked as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Zhao Haikong, who couldn't be dealt with, was as thin as a matchstick. It was as if his body had been hollowed out. I didn't expect that little bastard to be here too. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect was filled with murderous intent. Wu Zun's LV2 Saint Realm aura almost couldn't be suppressed. Wait a minute. When he steps on the path of 10,000 creations saint, we'll sneak attack him. At that time, this little bastard will definitely die. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect muttered to himself. At this moment, I'm a 10,000 creations saint. A voice that seemed to come from all directions slowly spread throughout the area. Chen Bufan, who was kneeling on one knee, also raised his head. His eyes were shining with ecstasy. The information was correct. This was indeed the place of the 10,000 creations saint's inheritance. The sky market was originally created by the saint and left behind the seeds of civilization. If this saint didn't have long to live, then it was very likely that he had placed his inheritance in the sky market. And the 10,000 creation sky market happened to be one of them. Those who wish to obtain my inheritance must kowtow with every step on the path of 10,000 creation saint. Only then will you be qualified. The 10,000 creations saint's emotionless voice rang out. In the next moment, the path of 10,000 creations saint suddenly enlarged. Everyone present had entered the first stage of the path of 10,000 creations saint. Kowtow with every step? Chen Bufan was slightly taken aback. Then he gritted his teeth. For the path of 10,000 creations saint for longevity, what harm was there in kowtowing? In the next moment, Chen Bufan kowtowed on the ground. Everyone present also knelt down and kowtowed. Tianyang, on the other hand, stood in the same spot with an indifferent expression. The path of 10,000 creation saint? He had the path of 10,000 creation saint. Why would he kowtow to a dead person? What are you doing? How dare you not kowtow in front of the saint? How disgraceful. At this moment, someone saw Tianyang standing in the middle of the crowd like a crane in a flock of chickens and cursed loudly. All of them kowtowed, except for Tianyang, who didn't kowtow. Didn't that mean that they had given up their dignity for power and were inferior to Tianyang? In front of the saint, one should have a heart of reverence. At this moment, the 10,000 creations saint spoke again. The powerful pressure almost suppressed Tianyang. However, Tianyang snorted coldly. The Tao of life and death was activated. Chapter 964. Scram. A thunderous roar reverberated through the clouds. Everyone's pupils constricted as they looked at Tianyang in disbelief. How dare he be so disrespectful to the sage's inheritance? The sage stood at the top of the pyramid of the great world, far above any Wuzun. He could change the world with a flip of his hand and turn the world upside down with a single thought. Ordinary Wuzun would not even be able to curry favor with such an existence. Naturally, they would kneel before the sage's inheritance. Who would dare to act like Tianyang and tell Scram, "You're courting death. If you don't want to kneel, then so be it. You can just withdraw yourself." I didn't expect him to be so arrogant and insult the sage. Now, even if we don't kill him, the pressure of the sage's path will crush him into dust. Someone sneered and said, Tianyang's fate was sealed. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect was overjoyed. This Tianyang dared to speak so arrogantly about becoming a sage. With the sage's arrogance, he would definitely tear Tianyang into pieces. Tianyang remained standing in the same spot, his back ramrod straight like a pine tree in the mountains. He did not move in the face of the pressure. The path of life and death in his body secretly circulated. It was not difficult for him to deal with the pressure of the 10,000 elephant saint's path of myriad elephant. Since that's the case, I'll take it that you have pride in your heart. However, you can't be arrogant. I'll punish you. Don't even think about stepping into my palace. As if realizing that he could not do anything to Tianyang, the emotionless voice sounded again. The pressure on Tianyang's body suddenly relaxed. Tianyang's face also revealed a cold smile. Did he really think that he cared? TSK, TSK, TSK. We cultivators can disregard everything for our cultivation. It's just kowtowing and kneeling. To us Wuzun, it's nothing. This guy refused to kneel out of anger and even resisted the pressure of the 10,000 elephant saint. If not for mercy of the 10,000 elephant saint, this guy would have died long ago. Seeing this, someone sneered with a look of disdain. Humans are social animals. If you blend into the crowd and have nothing outstanding, the crowd will accept you. If you were slightly special, then you would either become the leader of the crowd or be pushed aside. If you were extremely special, people would hate you, fear you, and want to chase you away or even kill you. To the countless Wuzun who had knelt before him, Tianyang was an extremely special existence. Now that they had to kowtow, it was difficult for them to make a move. However, Tianyang was certain that if there were no restrictions, they would have already made a move. Of course, Tianyang didn't care. What a pity. The 10,000 elephant saint is still too kind. In my opinion, this kind of person who offends the dignity of a saint should be killed. In the distance, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect snorted coldly. He seemed to be very dissatisfied with Tianyang's survival. However, now that Tianyang could neither advance nor kowtow, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect did not have a chance to make a move. Right now, he did not have another substitute talisman. If he was killed by Tianyang, not only would he not be able to reach the saint path, but his soul would also be destroyed. However, if I obtain the enlightenment of the 10,000 elephant saint, so what if this kid has a half-saint weapon? This old man can easily snatch it and kill this person. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect sneered. Then, he respectfully knelt down and kowtowed. His body flashed as he flew toward the second step of the saint path. There were a total of 1081 steps on the saint path. If he kowtowed for every step, if he was in the spiritual sea realm, his head would probably be broken. However, for Wu Zun's realm, this was nothing. It was just a slight humiliation to their dignity. However, for Wu Zun's realm, who thirsted for power, dignity, compared to the saint path, that was nothing. At this moment, Chen Bufan had already reached the 5th step. The other Wu Zun did not want to be outdone. They kowtowed at the speed of light and rushed up. After a while, there was no one around Tianyang. Everyone was rushing up. At this moment, Tianyang's expression suddenly changed. Looking at the people who were kowtowing, standing up, and kowtowing again and again, a trace of mockery appeared on his face. In less than 10 minutes, someone had arrived at the 1000th step. However, at this moment, the Wu Zun finally felt a trace of pressure. Kowtowing actually requires strength. However, the pressure now is still bearable. Chen Bufan's face showed a trace of surprise. Then, he continued to climb up. Well, it would be too easy to obtain the saint's inheritance just by kowtowing. Another 10 minutes passed. All the Wu Zun who were climbing up had arrived at the 2000th step. At this moment, oh no, I can't hold it anymore. Wu Zun's expression changed drastically. Just as he stood up, his feet suddenly loosened. He lost his balance and fell down. Just as he was about to use his inner qi, he was shocked to find that his inner qi had been sealed. Bang! 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 Wu Zun fell down instantly. His head hit the ground 3 times. When he returned to the 1st step, his head was already full of bumps and holes, and traces of blood flowed out. Wu Zun's fall seemed to be a fuse. After a while, other Wu Zun slammed down one after another. At the 1st step, the Saint Path power would seal a trace of inner qi. The higher one went, the stronger the sealing power. It was the same for the pressure. When the Wu Zun found that their inner qi had been sealed and they could no longer withstand the pressure, it was too late. However, 2 hours after the start, dozens of Wu Zun appeared around Tianyang. They were all top expert from the Donghai state, the Dongxian state, and the Dongtian state. At this moment, they were lying on the ground like dead dogs. If you want to obtain the saint's inheritance, you need not only sincerity, but also strength. Each of you should weigh your own strength before coming up to fight for it. Now your heads are bleeding. Chen Bufan looked at the bleeding heads of Wu Zun below with a mocking expression. Although his cultivation was sealed, Wu Zun's LV3 body would not change at all. At this moment, he was also the fastest to advance. At this moment, he had already reached the 7,000th step. Following closely behind was the 14th elder of the Songhai sect, Wu Zun's LV2 body, who had reached the 5,000th step. After him, there were some Wu Zun at the peak of LV1 body. The others had already fallen down. Not bad. I have seen your sincerity. At this moment, an emotionless voice sounded again. It was grand and carried layers of arrogance. Now, the restrictions will be lifted. Count out 10,088 times, and you will be able to enter the sacred palace and obtain my inheritance. The voice sounded again. Hearing this, Chen Bufan suddenly looked up with a shocked expression. That would do. As for the rest, you have already failed. You have no more chances. Hearing this, the Wu Zun who could not withstand the pressure and fell down immediately beat their chests and stomped their feet. Regret was written all over their faces. Above them, the remaining 7 Wu Zun used all their strength to kowtow and rushed into the sacred palace. At this moment, the voice sounded again. As for those who did not kowtow, I will give you a chance. No need to kowtow. As long as you can withstand 10 times the pressure, I will give you a chance to obtain the inheritance. Hearing this, the group of Wu Zun was stunned. No need to kowtow. Then why did they kowtow until their heads bled? However, after hearing the last sentence, a gloating expression appeared on everyone's faces. 10 times the pressure, even Wu Zun of the 5th stage would not be able to withstand it. This kid's stubbornness caused him to end up like this. Did you see that? This is the consequence of being too arrogant. Someone pointed at Tianyang and lectured the younger generation. Tianyang, on the other hand, had a strange expression on his face. You want me to embark on the path to becoming a saint? When I speak, I mean it. Hearing this, the corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up as he walked forward. Seeing this, another person sneered. You overestimate yourself. Do you think 10 times the pressure is so easy to withstand? Everyone expressed their disbelief. At this moment, Tianyang had already reached the edge of the second step. I hope you won't regret this. Hearing this, everyone was puzzled. Tianyang already had 1 foot on the second step. Suddenly, the step exploded. The third step, the fourth step, the fifth step, all the steps along the way were like dominoes. Bang, 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 bang. One by one, they exploded into pieces. Chapter 965. With one kick. Other than the first step that Tianyang was standing on, all the other steps crumbled within a short period of time. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. What was going on? The path to sainthood was extremely sturdy. Even a saint might not be able to shatter it with one kick. Moreover, no one knew if this young man was Wu Zun Realm LV2. Is there a problem with the path to sainthood? Some of the strong people's expressions changed as they realized the crux of the matter. Some of the strong people's expressions darkened. How dare you shatter the path to sainthood? That's the path to sainthood. You'll die sooner or later for blaspheming a saint. At this moment, the first step that Tianyang was standing on slowly disappeared and turned into ordinary ground. In the next moment, the furious man rushed over and waved his fist, aiming for Tianyang's face. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. The man imagined that Tianyang's head would explode, but it did not happen. Instead, the man's fist felt as if it had hit a steel wall, and he was in extreme pain. Scram! Tianyang waved his hand casually, and the attacker was sent flying a few hundred meters away by Tianyang. He crashed into a small hill before stopping. However, he was coughing up blood. Isn't that the eagle-clawed demon? Wu Zun Realm LV1. Even if he was severely injured, he shouldn't have been sent flying so easily. At this moment, someone recognized the attacker and exclaimed. The eagle-clawed demon was extremely famous in the savage lands of the southern Dongxing continent. Their right hand was refined with some unknown technique, and it was as sharp as an eagle's claw. Although what they used was not the claw technique that made the eagle-clawed demon famous, its power was not to be underestimated. But it was blocked by Tianyang with one hand. His true yuan is locked. How powerful can it be? Tianyang laughed disdainfully. You're in trouble, but you don't know what's going on. You guys are pretty impressive. What? Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. Their true yuan was locked? Shouldn't it have been removed after they fell? Wasn't this just a test for the path to sainthood? How could this be? It's really locked down. None of them had thought of this before. They were all lying on the ground, not using their Jun Yuan. Naturally, he did not notice the abnormality of the true essence immediately. Now that he was awakened by Tianyang, he looked inside himself and immediately discovered something. His dantian was covered by a purplish-black aura. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break through it. In other words, now, apart from the primordial spirit, the physical body, and Wu Zun, all these people had different abilities. As for the rest, he was simply a mortal who had never cultivated before. Wu Zun's quintessential essences were sealed, so a look of despair appeared on their faces. He didn't know what this purplish-black chi was, but it definitely wasn't anything good. If he couldn't make a breakthrough now, he might not be able to make a breakthrough in the future. Not to mention, the path to becoming a saint would produce this purplish-black chi. Wasn't that a little too terrifying? What the hell is going on? Suddenly, everyone looked at Tianyang, the only one who hadn't moved and was still in peak condition. How simple. You've all been fooled. Tianyang chuckled. The inheritance of the 10,000 elephant saint? Why don't you think about the situation 10,000 years ago? The great destruction of civilization had already happened. It's already good enough that they were able to create a small world and leave behind the sky market. How could they have the time to torture you with these 10,081 steps to test your sincerity? They even added pressure and forbidden magic to you? The Great Destruction of Civilization. The Great Destruction of Civilization was a term used by the Tianshao Great World to describe the calamity 10,000 years ago. There was no such term in the Xiantian Great World. However, the people present were not fools. They knew a thing or two about the calamity that had happened 10,000 years ago. They immediately understood what Tianyang was talking about. That's true. Everyone thumped their chests and stamped their feet. They couldn't believe that they had been fooled by such an obvious flaw. What was even more infuriating was that they had thought that this was really the inheritance of the saint. They had been so excited that they had kowtowed to the mastermind countless times. What about Chun Bufan, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect, and the others? Someone asked, if there was a problem with the path to sainthood, how would they explain it? Ask them yourself. Tianyang glanced at the sky with a faint smile on his face. Everyone followed Tianyang's gaze, and their expressions changed abruptly. As the path to sainthood shattered, the sacred palace at the top of the path also disappeared. However, when the sacred palace disappeared, the 7 people who had entered the sacred palace did not come down. Instead, they stood in the sky. Their eyes were entwined with purplish-black qi. Their bodies were shrouded by the same qi. The aura on their bodies also revealed a trace of strangeness. This is... No wonder the heavenly sword went berserk. Tianyang narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, he realized something. The heavenly sword devoured demonic qi and the power of martial souls. The power of a martial soul was summoned through the method of a martial soul. It could obtain energy from its own kind. In essence, the heavenly sword devoured demonic qi. Now that the heavenly sword had gone berserk and connected it to the familiar purplish-black qi, Tianyang would be an idiot if he still could not figure out who was behind it. Demons, huh? I didn't expect to see this bunch of demon bastards here. The corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up slightly. He looked amused. He did not expect the demons to appear in the Xiantian Great World. Moreover, they had entered the sky market. The demons? Hearing this, everyone was stunned for a moment. Then, they looked horrified. The demons that suddenly appeared in the divine central continent not long ago. They slaughtered hundreds of sects and turned an empire of 1 billion people into a sea of blood. Legend has it that there are countless records of the demons. Back then, the divine central continent sent out dozens of saints to kill the devil. Now, there are traces of the demons. Everyone was shocked. Tianyang raised his eyebrows. Not long ago, however, he was relieved. The great calamity of the demons occurred once every 10,000 years. The Xiantian Great World was a big tree that attracted the wind. Perhaps it was the first to be invaded. However, the Xiantian Great World was so strong that it did not need any help to deal with it. They are the demons, but they are from 10,000 years ago. Someone stared at the purplish-black, demonic qi on the 7 people. Even he did not realize that his voice had become hoarse. Moreover, they're the terrifying creatures that create illusions and bewitch all living beings, the Huanma. Floating behind the 7 people is the treasure of the Huanma tribe, the Huanma ancient book. That person's voice trembled. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed drastically. The Huanma ancient book? Chapter 966. The Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. Tianyang had killed a large number of demons in the Tianshao Great World, including the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. The Illusory Fiend King was one of them when he killed the 100 kings. After plundering their memories, he learned of the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. There was more than one Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. It could be said that every illusory fiend who had reached the Saint Realm had the ability to condense the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. However, a Saint Realm illusory fiend could only condense one Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. Once condensed, the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book would carry a portion of the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book's power. Even if no one was controlling it, it would rely on some basic intelligence to cast illusions and bewitch humans. Obviously, the culprit that had condensed the path to sainthood and played them like a fool was the Illusory Fiend Tome that floated above the 7 of them. A Saint Realm Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. Sure enough, every world has a different way of dealing with the demons. Tianyang clicked his tongue. To deal with the Tianshao Great World, the demons had only sent the demon emperor, who was at the peak of the heavenly ascension realm, and a group of demons. Only 3 years ago, the demon emperor had contacted the demons and asked for a portion of the great Lord of Heaven's power. To deal with the Shintian Great World, they had sent the illusory fiend ancient book. Moreover, not long ago, there had been a demon powerhouse who had slaughtered 1 billion creatures and attracted dozens of saints to besiege him. Although the world barrier had acted as a barrier, the demons themselves have played a bigger role. It's the illusory fiend ancient book. It's over. It's completely over. The great divine wind Wuzun, who had dominated the eastern sky state for decades, would die at the hands of an illusory fiend today. Countless people looked desperate. The illusory fiend ancient book was the demon's saint's possession. It was simply not something that martial honors like them could contend against. At this moment, they didn't even have the heart to run. They would die anyway. You speak too much nonsense. At this moment, Tianyang coldly snorted as he looked at the panicked marshal exalted. Compared to the humans in the Tianshao Great World who were still tenaciously fighting against the demons, these Wuzun realm illusory fiend ancient book. Could it be that you have a way? The illusory demon ancient book belongs to the demon saint. Even if it's just a small portion of its power, it's more than enough to kill you. Seeing that Tianyang was still disdainful, some of the Wuzun cultivators were instantly enraged. If it weren't for the fact that their Zhenyuan was sealed, they wouldn't have been a match for Tianyang at his peak. Otherwise, they would have gone to fight Tianyang to the death. Since they couldn't survive, they might as well fight amongst themselves. However, this way of doing things was a little silly. If it really has the power of the Devil's Saint, then what's the point of the Phantom Devil Ancient Book? Just use the power of the demon saint to imprison us in the illusion and slowly torture us to death. Why would I let you scream like a ghost now? Tianyang sneered. The demons have the Phantom Devil Ancient Book. Are you saying that the 10,000 Elephant Saint is a pushover? The demonic illusion ancient book is so obvious that it's impossible for the 10,000 manifestations saint to not notice it. Even if he was severely injured and on the verge of death, the demonic illusion ancient book would definitely be weakened. However, if the 10,000 manifestations saint knows that you idiots are fighting amongst yourselves here, I'm afraid he'll be pissed to death. Tianyang snorted coldly. The truth was just as he had analyzed. After 10,000 years, even the power of the devil saint couldn't be completely preserved. Moreover, the 10,000 manifestations saint had destroyed it before. The demonic illusion ancient book had been reconstructed, and its vitality was greatly damaged. It needed to absorb the energy of living beings, but there were no living beings in the Vientiane sky ruins. The real living beings were guarding the spiritual source sea. Therefore, the demonic illusion ancient book was getting weaker and weaker. Now it could only create an environment to step on the saint path to deceive these Wuzun. It wasn't impossible to figure it out if they thought about it. Unfortunately, these Wuzun were blinded by the saint's inheritance. How could they figure out the twists and turns in this? At this moment, the 7 people controlled by the purplish-black power of the demonic illusion ancient book in the sky suddenly moved. Blood-red, killing intent bloomed in their purplish-black pupils. In the next moment, they rushed down. Oh no, they're here. Everyone's expression changed. Divine Wind Wuzun immediately stood up and fled in the direction he came from. However, his true origin was sealed and his body was severely injured. He couldn't even travel through the void. How could he be a match for Chun Bufan, who was controlled by the demonic Qi and whose strength had increased? In the blink of an eye, Divine Wind Wuzun was smashed into a pulp by Chun Bufan's punch. The other 7 people also charged in a crowd and began a massacre. 14th Elder, it's me. It's my eldest young master, Zhao Haikong. You can't. The 14th Elder of the Songhai sect was also among the 7 people controlled. Zhao Haikong's face was full of fear. He retreated on the ground and begged for mercy. However, under the control of the demonic Qi, the 14th Elder of the Songhai sect had long lost his original nature. Why would he care about Zhao Haikong's life? Moreover, the 14th elder had never cared about Zhao Haikong's life before. Boom! The giant hammer smashed down. The head of the hammer, which was entwined with pitch-black lightning, smashed Zhao Haikong into a bloody mist. In other places, Wu Zun could not resist at all and were easily killed. At this moment, Tianyang made his move. He could not be bothered to care about the life and death of this group of Wu Zun. However, if he allowed this group of people to continue their massacre, the life essence they absorbed might restore the power of the illusory fiend ancient book. At that time, he would die here. Heavenly sword, martial soul talent, devouring sky. Tianyang roared, and the all-heavens sword in his hand shone brightly. The heavenly sword was attached to it, with the heaven-class martial soul attached to it. The all-heavens sword instantly shone brightly and recovered the power of a sacred artifact. At the same time, a terrifying devouring power erupted from Tianyang's body. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the power of mountains and rivers, and even the billowing demonic aura were all attracted by Tianyang and surged into Tianyang's body, turning into a part of Tianyang's cultivation. Everyone's attraction was also projected onto Tianyang's body. It was as if Tianyang had turned into the most central star in an endless galaxy, and everything else revolved around it. Wu Zun Stage 1 Realm. Wu Zun Stage 1 Realm Peak. Wu Zun Stage 2 Realm Peak. Wu Zun Stage 2 Realm Peak. In an instant, Tianyang's strength skyrocketed to Wu Zun Stage 2 Realm Peak before it stopped. It was not as powerful as before when it instantly increased by 3 to 5 small realms. However, compared to before, even if it was only one small realm, it was countless times stronger. Die! Tianyang's figure flashed, and he used the Void Step secret technique to appear in front of a Wu Zun Stage 1 Realm Peak. All Heavens Sword Slash Down. Sky Extreme Sword Technique. First Sword, Soaring Heavens. An extremely sharp sword cut through the void and slashed out. Brilliant heavenly might condensed on this sword light and directly chopped off Wu Zun's right arm. However, Wu Zun did not seem to feel pain. After his right arm was chopped off, he immediately fled far away. At this time, the other controlled Wu Zun also sensed Tianyang's presence and surrounded him. Demonic aura was released. Chapter 9:67. Streaks of purplish-black runes shot out, like venomous snakes from the abyss. Even Tianyang couldn't react in time before he was enveloped by the runes. After all, the 7 Wu Zuns were all under the control of the Phantom Fiend ancient book. Even the strongest disciple of the most united sect in the world couldn't achieve such tacit understanding. They were as meticulous as the most sophisticated machine. Oh no! The Myriad Saint is most skilled in the Tao of formations. Since the Phantom Fiend ancient book has been here for 10,000 years, could it have learned some of the Myriad Saint's techniques? After seeing Tianyang effortlessly cut off the right arm of one of the Wu Zun's group, hope was reignited in their hearts. Their faces instantly turned pale. The 10,000 manifestations Saint cultivated the Tao of myriad manifestations and had even integrated it into the formation. Whether it was the illusory formation over the spirit source sea or the great cloud formation at the edge of the sky market, they were all created by the Myriad Saint. The Phantom Fiend ancient book had been in the sky market for 10,000 years. It was nonsense to say that it didn't know any formations. This formation, could it be the strongest 7-man joint attack formation created by the Myriad Saint, the 7 sky-shattering formation? Someone's face was as white as a sheet as he stuttered. Although the Myriad Saint's strongest joint attack formation wasn't a saint-level battle formation, it wasn't far from it. It was considered one of the best 7th-level battle formations. Even if Tianyang used his secret technique, he was only a peak 2nd-level Wu Zun. How could he resist it? It's more appropriate to call it the 7-demon sky-shattering formation. Surrounded by the formation, Tianyang's expression did not change. He looked at the 7 expressionless martial saints around him who were continuously releasing the battle formation, controlled by the demonic chi. Using his primordial spirit, he could sense that the defense of these 7 people was impregnable. Tianyang wouldn't be able to kill any of them in less than 1 or 2 minutes. However, a minute or two was more than enough for the 7 of them to activate the array formation and kill Tianyang right there and then. So many troublemakers. Tianyang frowned slightly, and the all-heaven sword in his hand released dazzling sword beams. In the next moment, Tianyang moved. The true flames of destruction burned fiercely on his body. The sky firmament sword's devouring power completely erupted, devouring the surrounding demonic chi. In the next moment, a sharp sword ray viciously slashed at the one-armed martial honorable. He had already cut off one of Wu Zun's arms. It would be easy to deal with him. Be careful. Right at this moment, a blood-curdling scream was heard. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect, who was controlled by the devil chi, suddenly exploded. It was as if the strength of 7 people had gathered in his body, and he directly soared to the peak of Wu Zun realm. Streaks of black lightning coiled around the giant hammer, and it smashed down on Tianyang's head with unparalleled, terrifying force. Boom! Tianyang swung his sword backward, and the devouring power was completely released. Sky Extreme Sword Art, 5th Sword, trampling all lives. The ancestral dragon's body, primordial spirit power, and sky-devouring secret technique were all raised to the extreme in an instant. This sword contained almost all the strength that Tianyang could display. Boom! Tianyang's expression changed, and he retreated a few steps. At the same time, he slashed out countless sword rays towards the 14th elder of the Songhai sect. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect swung his giant hammer and smashed the countless sword rays. However, his body was forcefully pushed back dozens of meters, and Tianyang had another chance to attack. At this moment, behind Tianyang, a blood-red light flashed in the hollow eyes of the one-armed martial honorable who had remained motionless. He raised his remaining arm and charged towards Tianyang. Although he did not have the strength of the peak LV-3 Wu Zun of the Songhai sect's 14th elder, the one-armed Wu Zun had the cultivation of the peak LV-2 Wu Zun. Tianyang hurriedly turned around, but he could not block the punch and was sent flying hundreds of meters. This 7 demons shattering sky formation is indeed extraordinary. It doesn't even take time to switch targets. Tianyang landed on the ground with difficulty. He gritted his teeth and looked at the 7 people around him. The reversing formation required a lot of time to prepare, and it also consumed a lot of primordial spirit power. He could not display it at all now. As for the formation itself, it was even more difficult. How could the formation of the 10,000 creations saint be broken so easily? Even if he could not fully master the illusory fiend ancient book, he still had some of the power of the 10,000 creation saint. The most difficult part of a joint attack formation is the transmission of power between the 2 parties. The transmission of power mostly depends on the formation runes. However, these formation runes are extremely sturdy. Even if the Sky Cloud Sword is fully activated, it will be difficult for it to devour one of the runes. This will not work. Tianyang's expression was solemn. The all-heavens sword in his hand pulsed with sword light. This was the first time he had encountered such a difficult joint attack formation. The 10,000 creations saint had not only cultivated the Tao of 10,000 creations to the Sage realm, but his formation skills were also not far from the Sage realm. However, this formation does not restrict my movements. Tianyang's eyes suddenly lit up. The corner of his mouth curled up, and in the next moment, he charged towards Chun Bufan. The all-heavens sword in his hand suddenly condensed the true yuan of the peak LV-2 Wuzun. One Saint martial technique shook the world. 10,000 swords in origin. At this moment, Chun Bufan also condensed the power of the peak LV-3 Wuzun and collided with Tianyang. Boom! Tianyang's figure instantly flew backwards. The peak LV-3 Wuzun was still too powerful. The 14th elder of the Songhai sect had not been able to control it, which had given him the opportunity. However, now that Chun Bufan had made his move, it was not difficult for him to control the power of the peak LV-3 Wuzun. This punch landed. Tianyang's 10,000 swords in origin was directly shattered, and he flew backwards. However, Tianyang's face revealed a trace of pride. Void Step Secret Technique, 10,000 Movement Technique. Tianyang smiled slightly and unleashed a terrifying speed towards the illusory fiend ancient book in the sky. Even if he could not deal with a person, he could still deal with an inanimate object. In order to control these 7 people, the illusory fiend ancient book had already gathered all the demonic energy on their bodies. Now, the illusory fiend ancient book was just an empty shell that could only give orders. 7 demons shatter the heavens. At this moment, similar to the voice of the 10,000 Mammoth Saint, but it was made by 7 different people, all of a sudden, a voice rang out. Countless Wu Zun's pupils constricted as they looked at the 7 people. The 7 demons shattering the heavens formation was not just a simple joint attack formation. Even if this last move was a replica of the illusory fiend ancient book, it was still extremely terrifying. It gathered the strength of 7 people, the power of the formation, and a monstrous demonic energy to unleash a powerful attack. Sacred Martial, piercing heaven and earth. At this moment, Tianyang roared, and the all-heavens sword in his hand burned with true yuan. At this moment, countless Wu Zun rushed up from below. "You must block it," countless Wu Zun roared. His true yuan was sealed, and his primordial spirit. If his primordial spirit was insufficient, he still had his physical body. Even if there were only his primordial spirit and physical body, the strength of dozens of Wu Zun was extremely terrifying. Boom, 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 boom. With the piercing heaven and earth as the center, countless Wu Zun, be it primordial spirit or physical body, collided fiercely with the 7 demons shattering the heavens. A terrifying shockwave spread out in all directions from the center of the battle. Mountains flew up, the ground was overturned, and rivers flowed in reverse. Countless treasures were destroyed just like that. The dozens of Wu Zun also spat out mouthfuls of blood, and their auras fell to the lowest point. However, Tianyang also used the recoil to fly up into the sky, where the illusory fiend ancient book was. Devour. He grabbed the illusory fiend ancient book with one hand. Rumbling devouring power erupted. P.S. Unfortunately, the author has officially started the 2nd semester of the 3rd year of middle school. This is also commonly known as the sprint period for the middle school exams. It's very likely that the author will not be able to update 3 or 4 times. Since school is starting now, I'll update 3 times a day if I can. However, after the morale-raising ceremony, I'm afraid I'll only be able to update 2 times a day until the middle school exams end. It's still easy to start school, so I'll give you a heads up. If you see a day where I only update 1 or 2 times a day, please don't scold me. That's because Chapter 968. The Heavenly Sword was the natural nemesis of demonic qi. Tianyang had already retracted the Heavenly Sword into his body and condensed it in his right hand. Therefore, the devouring power in his right hand began to devour. A tremendous devouring force burst out and devoured the demonic qi of the illusionary demon ancient book like a whale, swallowing everything. How was this possible? Everyone's expression changed drastically. They were all in disbelief. The illusory fiend ancient book was a sacred item condensed by the illusory fiend saint. Although it was not a sacred item, its power far exceeded that of a half-sacred item. Even if it was severely damaged, it should still have the power of a half-sacred item. But now, the demonic qi on the illusory fiend ancient book was like a lamb in front of a big bad wolf. It was swallowed by Tianyang without any resistance. This guy can actually devour demonic qi. No one had noticed it during the fierce battle earlier. Now, seeing Tianyang swallow the demonic qi on the illusory fiend ancient book without being affected, everyone's faces turned pale. Could this young man be a demon too? They had already exhausted all their strength in order to block the previous attack. If Tianyang attacked them again, they wouldn't even have the slightest chance to resist. If he's a demon, he would have killed us already. Moreover, he's our savior. So what if he's a demon? Someone spoke. It was Wu Zun who was at the peak of LV1. Previously, He had already been slightly injured in the spiritual source sea. Hence, he was not like the other rank 1 martial honorables who had stepped onto the holy road and entered the sacred hall. Therefore, he was not controlled by the demonic chi. This person was quite famous in the eastern sky state. At this moment, his words were the most convincing. That's right. Since this young man has already saved our lives, if we continue to speculate, won't others laugh at us for biting the hand that fed us? At this moment, another burly man spoke. His voice was as loud as thunder. I, Frenzy Blade Wu Zun, believe you. If anyone wants to attack our savior, they'll have to go through me first. The burly man said loudly. Hearing this, everyone nodded. That was indeed the case. At this time, Tianyang's progress in devouring the illusion fiend ancient book was getting faster and faster. At this moment, a terrifying light suddenly burst out from the illusory fiend ancient book and engulfed Tianyang. There's still more trouble. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to release the all-heaven sword, a loud voice suddenly rang out from within the light. At this moment, Tianyang realized that the light that drowned him was not the purplish black of the demonic chi, but a mass of chaos. Amidst the chaos, there were traces of gold. Who would have thought that there would be a time when my nascent spirit brand would be freed from the illusory fiend tome? A loud and clear voice rang out, and in the next moment, a man suddenly appeared in front of Tianyang. The man was tall, young, and handsome. His black hair reached his waist, and he wore a green and white robe. Starlight flickered in his eyes, as if they were all-encompassing. Wanxiang Saint. At this moment, no matter how stupid Tianyang was, he knew who this person was. The heavenly sword did not move at all and continued to devour the demonic chi of the illusory fiend ancient book. All of this was definitely not an illusion of the illusory fiend ancient book. After 10,000 years, I've heard this name again. I'm filled with emotions. The young man smiled. Although he looked young, his words were filled with vicissitudes of life. Hearing this, Tianyang was sure that this person was the Wanxiang Saint. However, this Wanxiang Saint did not look like he was alive. As if he saw through Tianyang's doubts, the Wanxiang Saint laughed self-deprecatingly and said, You must want to know why I'm in this illusory fiend ancient book, right? Back then, I cultivated for 1,245 years and passed the tribulation to become a saint. I was proud and arrogant, thinking that I was the best in the world. However, not long after I became a saint, the apocalyptic natural disaster came. I almost died in it. After I did my best to construct the sky market, I happened to find the illusory fiend ancient book that had been suppressed under the sky market for who knows how long. At that time, I did not know how powerful the illusory fiend saint was. I directly branded my primordial spirit on the illusory fiend ancient book. I wanted to use the power of the illusory fiend ancient book to create an illusion that no one would know about and heal my injuries. The Wanxiang Saint laughed softly. However, as soon as my primordial spirit was branded, the remaining demonic chi killed me and left me with a primordial spirit brand. Hearing this, Tianyang was speechless. The Wanxiang Saint was really open-minded. He let go of the grudge of killing him so easily. However, I don't have long to live anyway. It doesn't make a difference if I die earlier or later. It's just that I can't pass down my legacy. It's very depressing. The Wanxiang Saint laughed. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. The Wanxiang Saint wanted to pass down the Tao of Wanxiang. However, Tianyang already had the Saint Realm Sword Tao and the Tao of Life and Death. He did not have much desire for the Wanxiang Saint's Tao of Wanxiang. I can see the power of the Saint Path in you. I'm afraid that you'll reject me as soon as I mention it. However, the Tao of Wanxiang is all-encompassing. The Tao foundation that I relied on to become a saint probably did not even comprehend a trace of the Tao of Wanxiang. If you want to integrate the strengths of many schools and reach the peak, then the Tao of Wanxiang should be of great help to you. The Wanxiang Saint laughed. Although he was only a remnant soul, he still had the eyesight of a saint. Tianyang's terrifyingly young age and the saint path aura on him all represented how amazing Tianyang's talent was. Such a genius would definitely not stop at the saint realm. Perhaps his goal was to reach the saint realm, integrate the strengths of many schools, and reach the peak of martial arts. Hearing this, Tianyang's pupils contracted slightly. Wasn't this the path that he was walking? The Tao of Wanxiang had such an effect. One more saint path means one more way to become a saint. I'm not boasting, but when I first passed the saint tribulation and became a saint, I'm afraid that even an ordinary saint would not be able to defeat me. If you can cultivate the Tao of Wanxiang to great success, perhaps not many people in the entire Xintian great world will be your match. The Wanxiang saint smiled as his body became more and more transparent. He was just a primordial spirit brand. The real Wanxiang saint had died tens of thousands of years ago and had become a part of heaven and earth. All right, Tianyang nodded heavily. Hearing this, the Wanxiang saint smiled. Although less than a tenth of my Tao of Wanxiang remains, it's still a Tao. I'll give this Tao to you. The Wanxiang saint pointed a finger, and a mysterious wave rushed into Tianyang's forehead. Chapter 9:69. Compared to the vast sage path that the Wanxiang saint had comprehended when he was alive, what this primordial spirit brand left behind was far too little. The Wanxiang Tao was a great Tao. Once one comprehended the sage realm and broke through a shackle, it would be the sage path. Above that, there might be something like the divine path. However, the Wanxiang saint's primordial spirit brand could only give Tianyang a primer that would lead him to the Wanxiang Tao. However, compared to the Wanxiang saint's great Tao comprehension that had reached the sage realm, this primer was obviously more precious. No matter how profound the Wanxiang saint's great Tao cultivation was, it ultimately belonged to someone else. Although it was only a primer, everything that Tianyang had comprehended after stepping into the Wanxiang Tao belonged exclusively to him. This way, he could stride further on the path of martial arts, all-encompassing, just like the chaos before the creation of the heavens. I see. That mysterious fluctuation gradually spread in Tianyang's spirit sea, and countless insights suddenly appeared in Tianyang's mind. The sage realm, sword Tao, and the life and death Tao also began to circulate slowly. Great Taos were not isolated. The three great Taos that Tianyang had comprehended began to corroborate and strengthen each other. Tianyang's cultivation also advanced by leaps and bounds at this moment. Tianyang was having a great time cultivating in seclusion in midair, but Wu Zun and the others, whose true Yuan was still locked down below, were having a hard time. Although the Fantasy Fiend Ancient Book was gone, the true Yuan seal that the Fantasy Fiend Ancient Book had placed on them was still there. It was just that it was easier to refine than before. To be able to cultivate in seclusion in such an illusory realm, this young man is indeed not an ordinary person. Someone exclaimed, looking at Tianyang with a face full of reverence. In their opinion, Tianyang's age was around 30 to 50 years old. Compared to them, he was much younger. However, he was the one who had seen through the illusory realm of the Fantasy Fiend Ancient Book and resisted the seven demons' sky-shattering formation. He was still the one who devoured the demonic chi of the illusory demon Ancient Book and completely dissipated the illusion. This group of Wu Zun's role here was more like icing on the cake than sending charcoal in snowy weather. What's more, before adding the icing on the cake, he had even hindered the Tianyang quite a bit. Oh well, that level of heaven's favorite is not someone we can stand shoulder to shoulder with. We are already extremely lucky to be able to meet him. Someone said, why don't we think about how to befriend such a genius? You should know that such a genius is hard to find even in the Eastern Sky Divine region. He's already extremely lucky to be able to appear in our Eastern Sky Divine region, Eastern Sea Divine region, and Eastern Profound region. Hearing this, everyone fell silent. Making friends, especially making friends with peerless geniuses, was extremely important for those with powerful backgrounds. If he were to encounter any danger, perhaps the friends he made would be able to help him. If he grew up, he would have a powerful friend to help him when he fought for power in the future. His chances of success would be greatly increased. However, this group of Wu Zun was having a headache right now. Previously, they had mocked and ridiculed Tianyang to no end. Even if they had helped Tianyang, it was uncertain whether their anger would be appeased. At this moment, the 7 people who were unable to move due to the demon Shi being devoured by the illusion fiend ancient books suddenly trembled. So that's how it is. The myriad Tao is not a single great Tao at all. It encompasses everything. That's the true essence of this great Tao. The myriad Tao saint has cultivated the formation Tao and the saber Tao, and he has integrated them into the myriad Tao. That's why he was able to push the myriad Tao to the saint realm. However, it doesn't mean that more is better. The more chaotic it is, the more harmful it is to the growth of the myriad Tao. Tianyang muttered to himself with a hint of excitement on his face. If the myriad Tao was really like this, then there was no doubt that it was the most suitable great Tao for Tianyang. The myriad Tao saint had achieved the myriad Tao through the formation Tao and the saber Tao. When he first entered the saint realm, he was almost invincible. On the other hand, Tianyang already had the saint realm sword Tao and the saint realm Tao of life and death, as well as the formation Tao and the pill Tao, which were not considered weak. If he could integrate them into the myriad Tao, wouldn't he become a saint immediately? Of course, this was only Tianyang's delusion. If he really integrated the myriad Tao, he would only be able to become a saint based on his cultivation level. His primordial spirit, physical body, and the most important vital essence would still need to be accumulated over time. However, this was also a great piece of news. Now it's time to break through. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. In the next moment, his eyes opened. A dazzling beam of light shot out, as if it was going to cover the sun in the sky. At this moment, Tianyang's eyes seemed to contain endless light. Everyone's attention was drawn to Tianyang. It was as if Tianyang was the center of this world. Spirit Qi condense. Tianyang roared. The abundant spirit Qi in the surroundings instantly condensed into a spirit fog, enveloping Tianyang. He formed a seal with both hands and released the devouring sky seal. It turned into a terrifying black vortex, swallowing the spirit Qi of heaven and earth. At the exit of the sky market, the spirit energy of the spirit source ocean was also flowing into the spirit fog, condensing spirit Qi into fog. This young man has already reached this stage. To be able to do this, the power of this young man's primordial spirit is probably not inferior to Wu Zun's realm level 3. Some people were shocked as they looked up at Tianyang, who was covered in spirit fog. If it was only a small area condensing spirit Qi into fog, it would not be a big deal. However, Tianyang had condensed the spirit Qi of the entire sky market and even the spiritual source C into a huge spirit fog. The spirit fog around Tianyang was huge and thick. It was even bigger than the great cloud formation from before. At this moment, Tianyang's hand seals changed again. The huge spirit fog was suddenly compressed and turned into drops of spirit liquid. The spirit liquid gathered and turned into a gurgling stream. As the spirit liquid condensed, the gurgling stream became wider and wider. Finally, it turned into a torrential river. Devouring sky seal, devour. At this moment, Tianyang roared, and the black vortex expanded to its limit. The 108 ancestral dragon marks on Tianyang's body lit up. His physical body was the first to start transforming. Then, it was the primordial spirit. Beside the 5 stars, the embryonic form of a star condensed rapidly. Finally, it turned into the 6th star, the Mizar star. Finally, it was the primordial spirit. In Tianyang's body, the boundless spirit ocean was fluctuating. As the river of spirit Qi poured in, it became bigger and bigger. The divine wilderness heaven spirit art was circulated to the maximum, and the boundless spirit ocean shone with thousands of rays of light. In the light, the boundless spirit ocean's volume suddenly shrank. However, the purity of the primordial spirit was much higher. His physical body, primordial spirit, and primordial spirit all transformed together. What welcomed him was a huge increase in his cultivation level. Wu Zun's Realm Level 1 Peak. Chapter 970. Wu Zun LV2 Realm. A terrifying pressure erupted from Tianyang's body. Comprehending the Tao of all creations had not only brought Tianyang an improvement in his great Tao. Even his primordial spirit, vital essence, and physical body were strengthened once again. Not only had Tianyang's vital essence cultivation reached Wu Zun LV2 Realm, but his primordial spirit had also reached the peak of Wu Zun LV5 Realm. His physical body was strong enough to resist a sage-level weapon. Not bad. Tianyang smiled and clenched his fists. Waves of power surged through his body, causing him to squint his eyes. Then he punched out. Boom! The space that the heavenly sun bombarded was like a glass plate that had been hit by a heavy object. Spiderweb-like cracks spread across the space, and then it exploded with a loud bang. A miniature spatial turbulence erupted from the shattered space. However, Tianyang calmed it down with a flip of his hand. The space in Sky Market is even more stable than the mysterious Sky Great World. I can now shatter the space in Sky Market with a punch. This means that my fist strength has surpassed most LV2 Wu Zun Realm experts. Tianyang smiled and withdrew his aura. His divine light was restrained, and his true yuan was restrained. Apart from the miraculous features of his skin and eyes, Heavenly Sun's performance was that of an ordinary person. Then, Tianyang slowly walked down the stairs and landed on the ground. The illusion fiend ancient book, which had absorbed all the demonic qi, appeared in his hand. Wu Zun broke through to LV2 Realm and imprinted his primordial spirit on the illusion fiend ancient book. What a pleasant surprise. Tianyang muttered to himself. Back then, the Thousand Creations Saint had been devoured by the illusion fiend ancient book because he had been severely injured and had been attacked by the demonic qi. But now Tianyang was at his peak. The demonic qi on the book had been completely devoured by Tianyang. Tianyang's primordial spirit imprint was easily imprinted on it. However, the essence of the illusory fiend ancient book would not disappear because of the loss of demonic qi. In Tianyang's hands, the fantasy devil ancient book was still a terrifying half-saint weapon. Keep. Tianyang held the demon illusion ancient tome in his hand and uttered a single word. Immediately, the demonic qi in the seven people's bodies disappeared. It was absorbed by Tianyang and turned into a part of the heavenly sword. After devouring the demonic aura of the illusory demon ancient book, the Sky Firmament sword was getting closer and closer to becoming a sacred martial soul. As Tianyang collected the demon qi, a glimmer of light suddenly appeared in the pitch-black empty eyes of the seven people. Then, the seven of them returned to their original state. Ha ha ha! I've finally obtained the sage's legacy. Just you wait. That little bastard who calls himself Grandmaster Yang will definitely die. At this moment, Songhai Sek's 14th elder suddenly burst into laughter. The others were also ecstatic. Without exception, they were all talking about the sage's legacy. It seems that the illusory fiend ancient book created an environment for them to obtain the sage's legacy. Tianyang shook his head and watched their performance. However, in the next moment, Songhai Sek's 14th elder noticed that something was amiss and looked around. The heavily injured Wu Zun was similar. They had no sincerity and perseverance, so they deserved to be heavily injured by the sage. However, what about the people who entered the sacred hall with him? Didn't I obtain the sage's legacy and kill all of you? That's strange. Didn't I defeat all of you and obtain the sage's legacy? Why are all of you still here? The seven people looked at each other and were stunned. Chen Bufan, who had just woken up, was shocked. He finally reacted. Could it be that everything I saw and heard was an illusion? Chen Bufan mumbled to himself, then looked at the eighth person closest to them, Tianyang. Looking at the purplish-black book in Tianyang's hand, Chen Bufan's expression changed. This is the illusory fiend ancient book. Everything that happened before was an illusion created by the illusory fiend ancient book. Chen Bufan was an immortal level after all, so he was quite smart. After looking at the illusory fiend ancient book in Tianyang's hand, he realized the truth. However, to the others, this truth was not very friendly. Illusion? Songhai Sek's 14th elder was stunned. Illusion? How could it be an illusion? I killed all of you. I obtained the sage's legacy. Songhai Sek's 14th elder roared. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Tianyang, who was holding the illusory fiend ancient book. It's you, you little bastard. You took away my sage's legacy. I'm going to kill you. Songhai Sek's 14th elder roared. Wu Zun's spiritual ether, which was at LV2, exploded. In the next moment, he used his body movement technique and moved at extreme speed. The thunder giant hammer appeared in his hand. Lightning flashed as he smashed it toward Tianyang. Little bastard die? Huh, Tianyang chuckled. He had already expected how Songhai Sek's 14th elder would react when faced with the contrast between the illusion and reality. Therefore, he did not panic at all and directly activated his primordial spirit power. 6 stars of the secret skill of 7 stars appeared simultaneously. Dubhi, Merak, Fekta, Migrez, Alioth, and Mizar. The 6 stars seemed to be connected to each other. They froze Songhai Sek's 14th elder in place. Star confinement. However, even though he was trapped, Songhai Sek's 14th elder's face was filled with madness. He kept attacking the cage formed by the star confinement and shouted madly, "Die for me! Die!" Seeing this, the others frowned slightly. Everything that happened before was just an illusion. Master Yang saved you. Not only did you not feel grateful, but you also resented Master Yang for pulling you out of the illusion? Perhaps some people would rather live in an illusion for the rest of their lives. Chen Bufan said. He felt a little lost after losing the sage's inheritance. However, compared to the Songhai Sek's 14th elder, he was relieved. The sage's inheritance was never his. How could he lose it? On the other hand, the Songhai Sek's 14th elder's mind had been confused by the illusion. This kind of person was the most miserable. Master Yang, do you need my help? Chen Bufan knew Tianyang's name from the Songhai Sek's 14th elder shouting. No need. He's just an ant. Tianyang shrugged and put the illusory fiend ancient book into his space bag. Then he pointed his finger. There was no smoke or fire, no martial technique, and no vital essence. It was just an ordinary finger. However, it was this finger that opened a bloody hole between the eyebrows of the Songhai Sek's 14th elder's eyebrows. It was so big that even a thin thread could not pass through it. Then, the Songhai Sek's 14th elder fell to the ground with a loud thud. His pupils gradually dilated, and he was completely dead. This time, Chapter 971. With just one finger, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect, who had slaughtered tens of thousands of people and stained his hands red, had his head pierced through and his body and soul destroyed. Most importantly, even Chen Bufan was unable to see through it. What technique did Tianyang use? This, Chen Bufan's face was pale. Even though he was being controlled, he could still sense the aura of Wu Zun's LV2 realm that Tianyang had released. Before this, the 14th elder of the Songhai sect was the only LV2 Wu Zun. Now, there was another person. Without a doubt, it was Tianyang who had killed the 14th elder of the Songhai sect with just one finger. However, how did Wu Zun, who was only at LV2 realm, kill the 14th elder of the Songhai sect without a sound? Chen Bufan could not figure it out. Tianyang muttered to himself as he looked at the 14th elder of the Songhai sect, who had fallen to the ground and would never get up again. It seems like the Tao of myriad forms is also helpful to other saint paths. Now, the Tao of creation and destruction can be condensed in one finger. If I accumulate enough energy, I can enter the saint realm with the Tao of creation and destruction. Tianyang muttered to himself. He did not know. The reason why other Wu Zun could not enter the saint realm, even after spending thousands of years, was because they did not have a saint path. They could not even touch the edge of the saint path. It was even more difficult for them to enter the saint realm with what they had cultivated. Therefore, they could not enter the saint realm, or even the half-saint realm, even if they tried their best and spent their entire lives. If they knew that the Vientiane Sky ruins had a primer for the holy path of myriad forms, they would rush in and fight for it at all costs. For those Wu Zun at the peak, the most precious thing was the primer to enter the Saint Realm. As for the half-Saint Realm, it was the peak Wu Zun at the peak of the Saint Realm. However, it was only half a step into the Saint Realm. Grandmaster Yang, may I know your name? I, an immortal level, will definitely remember your kindness. At this time, Chen Bufan finally mustered up his courage and said to Tianyang, although the young man in front of him had killed the 14th elder of the Songhai sect with a single finger, it was very likely that he could kill him as well. However, for his own sake and for the sake of the immortal level, it was necessary to befriend him. Yang Tianyang said. Tianyang had a good impression of the immortal level. After all, the information given by the palace master of the Sky Qin Palace was too incomplete. She did not even mention the spirit source sea. If Chen Bufan had not given him the information, he might not have been able to find the entrance to Sky Market. Moreover, although Chen Bufan's cultivation was at the 3rd level of Wu Zun's realm, he was not as domineering and overbearing as the 14th elder of the Songhai sect. This was enough to make Tianyang have a good impression of him. Perhaps some people would think that Chen Bufan did not have to take the information that he told everyone to heart. But for Tianyang, whether it was only to Tianyang or to the public, as long as he benefited from this information, he would be indebted to Yang Tian. It was just that there were big and small differences. So it's Grandmaster Yang Tian. It's an honor to meet you. Chen Bufan smiled and said. He did not even know Tianyang's name before, so what was there to meet? With Grandmaster Yang's ability, the Donghai state should not be able to accommodate you. The strongest person in the Donghai state is only at the 3rd level of Wu Zun's realm, the king of the East Sea. Maybe he can't even beat me. With Grandmaster Yang's peerless talent, the stage should not only be here. Chen Bufan said. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. That was true. He had stayed in Jiangbei City because he had been seriously injured and needed time to recover. However, now that his strength had been restored, there was indeed no need to stay in the Donghai state. Then what do you mean? Tianyang chuckled. Although he had a good impression of Chen Bufan, it did not mean that Tianyang would be fooled by him. After all, Tianyang had died once. If Grandmaster Yang has nowhere to go, why don't you come to the immortal level? Chen Bufan said. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed slightly. If Grandmaster Yang went to the immortal level, what could they do? Such a genius, the immortal level, must not be let go. By then, they would probably not be able to see Tianyang again. However, if they were to invite Grandmaster Yang now, they asked themselves honestly, if they were Grandmaster Yang, they probably would not accept an invitation from a group of people who had ridiculed them crazily before. The immortal level? Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. He had heard of this force from the palace master of the Sky Heart Palace. It was one of the overlords of the Dongxian state, alongside the Songhai sect. It was also the ruler of the southern part of the Dongxian state. Among them, there was Wu Zun at the peak. There were even rumors that the immortal level had a sage orthodoxy. In this regard, they were much stronger than the Songhai sect. It's not impossible. Tianyang chuckled. He still had a good impression of Chen Bufan, so there was no harm in accepting Chen Bufan's invitation. It just so happened that he was going to leave the Donghai state, and going to the immortal level was also a good choice. Thank you, Grandmaster Yang. Hearing this, Chen Bufan looked grateful. I will be eternally grateful. Hearing this, Tianyang only smiled. He had only agreed to go to the immortal level, and he might not stay there for long. If Chen Bufan asked him to do something, it would be hard to say whether he would agree or not. Previously, when Tianyang had saved their lives, he had already repaid the favor. But now, I haven't finished exploring the Sky Market. Tianyang smiled. Hearing this, Chen Bufan's face turned serious, and Wu Zun's LV3 aura slowly released. He looked at everyone present, including his old servant, with an unfriendly expression. I don't think I need to say it. Hearing this, everyone shuddered, then nodded heavily. Grandmaster Yang wanted to explore the Sky Market. How could they compete with him? Immediately, everyone understood tacitly and walked in the direction they had come from. Grandmaster Yang, we will wait for you in the spiritual source sea, Chen Bufan said. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded slightly. In the next moment, everyone left the sky market and went to the spiritual source sea. In the vast sky market, Tianyang was the only one. I have obtained the path of the thousand creations, Saint, and I can sense that this small world was created through the path of thousand creations. Now that I have the path of thousand creations and the recognition of the thousand creations, Saint, maybe. Tianyang smiled slightly and stretched out his hand. His palm was immediately covered by a layer of chaos. In the next moment, the path of thousand creations was activated, and Tianyang suddenly felt it. He had established a marvelous connection with this small world. This connection was similar to the Earth Emperor's spiritual herb garden. Indeed, Chapter 972, a small dimension, was extremely precious. The Earth Emperor's spiritual herbal garden that Tianyang had previously obtained was at the level of a portable space. The space inside was not even as big as a large space bag. However, the sky market was different. Although the sky market was a temporary creation, its size was definitely not comparable to the Earth Emperor's small dimension. It might not even be the size of a country. However, it was extremely huge for a single person. Tianyang was able to control the Vientiane sky market. If others were to hear this, they would definitely go crazy. The sky market could be said to be the sturdiest fortress that an ordinary Wu Zun could come into contact with. The spiritual qi within it was extremely abundant. Previously, when Tianyang had turned the spiritual qi into a river and continuously devoured it, he had only used up a small portion of the spiritual qi in the Vientiane sky market. Compared to the terrifying spiritual qi in the Vientiane sky market, it was a drop in the ocean. It was a sturdy fortress and a place for cultivation. It could be said that the sky market was an existence that most Wu Zun dreamt of. It was a pity that after the first sky market was discovered, no one other than a sage could control the sky market. A sage could create a small dimension that was even stronger than the sky market. The sky market was dispensable to a sage. They could not obtain what they wanted, but they could obtain what they did not want. Tianyang was the only Wu Zun in the mysterious sky great world who had controlled the sky market. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the sky market is extremely abundant, far surpassing any martial sanctuary in the Tianshao great world. Even the Earth Emperor's spiritual herbal garden could not compare to it. If I combine the Earth Emperor's spiritual herbal garden with the Vientiane sky market, wouldn't it be perfect? Tianyang's face lit up. Then, without hesitation, he took out the Earth Emperor's spiritual herbal garden. Then his true origin surged, and the divine wilderness sky spiritual art was activated rapidly. The Earth Emperor's spiritual herbal garden instantly turned into its original form in the small dimension. Spiritual herbs were everywhere within a 10-mile radius. In the middle of the garden, an ancient infant soul fruit tree swayed unsteadily. "Where's this?" the infant soul fruit tree asked curiously. Then, all the branches and leaves on its body stretched out. So comfortable. A small dimension with abundant spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Tianyang smiled. "If you can take root here. There are no other creatures here, so there are no threats." The main body of the Earth Emperor's spiritual herb garden was the infant soul fruit tree. Back then, it was because the infant soul fruit tree had decided to side with Tianyang that the earthly emperor's spiritual herb garden was obtained by Tianyang. Now, if he wanted to merge the Earth Emperor's spiritual herb garden with the Vientiane sky ruins, he would need the infant soul fruit tree's consent. However, if there are any unforeseen circumstances, it can be terminated at any time. Tianyang said with a serious expression. Compared to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, Tianyang valued the life of the infant soul fruit tree more. If the infant soul fruit tree rejected the Vientiane sky ruins, Tianyang would rather give up the Vientiane sky ruins to protect the infant soul fruit tree. No, the heaven and earth spiritual qi here was very pure. Furthermore, it has a special power, which makes it very convenient to absorb. The infant soul fruit tree innocently laughed and said, "Not only did I not reject my roots here, the land here even welcomed me. Look." Then the infant soul fruit tree shook its branches slightly. A huge earth spike rose from the ground below and swayed along with the infant soul fruit tree's branches. At this moment, the infant soul fruit tree had taken root in the Vientiane sky ruins, and it could even use the power of heaven and earth in the Vientiane sky ruins. That's good. Tianyang heaved a sigh of relief, and the corner of his lips curled up. With the Vientiane sky ruins, Tianyang had gained an excellent place to grow herbs. At the same time, he had gained a life-saving trump card. With the sturdiness of the Vientiane sky ruins, unless a sage attacked, Wu Zun would not be able to break through the defenses of the Vientiane sky ruins. In the future, if he met someone that he could not defeat, he could just take out the Vientiane sky ruins and wait for an opportunity to strike. That person would definitely be defeated. If that's the case, that's good. Tianyang chuckled and his body flashed. He appeared above the spiritual origin sea automatically. "Master Yang, you're here." The moment Tianyang appeared above the spiritual origin sea, the voices of the great demons and humans rang out at the same time. Due to Tianyang's presence, the group of great demons had dispersed, but they did not go too far. Now that the human Wu Zun had appeared, the great demons were so frightened that they immediately gathered together. If not for Tianyang's appearance, the group of great demons and Wu Zun would have already started a war. "I wonder what Master Yang has gained," Chun Bufan muttered to himself. Looking at Tianyang's smiling face, he guessed that Tianyang must have gained a lot. A trace of depression appeared on his face. He had traveled thousands of miles to the Vientiane sky ruins for the Vientiane Saints' inheritance and the treasures in the Vientiane sky ruins. Now, the Vientiane Saint inheritance was fake, and he had almost lost his life. Needless to say, the treasures were all monopolized by Tianyang. However, being able to get to know a peerless genius like Master Yang, this trip was worth it. At this thought, Chun Bufan's face lit up with joy again. He flew in front of Tianyang. "Master Yang, do you need a boundary breaker talisman? I have one here that can open the exit of the Vientiane sky ruins." Hearing this, the group of great demons was stunned. Wasn't Master Yang on bad terms with humans? Why was the most powerful human being so respectful to him now? No need. Tianyang shook his head. Now that he was the owner of the Vientiane sky ruins, wouldn't it be easy for him to open a door to the outside world? Then Tianyang waved his hand casually. Streaks of spatial turbulence suddenly appeared in the sky. In the next instant, a huge spatial door appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Heavy snow swirled in the air, and thousands of miles were covered in ice. Vaguely, the silhouette of an Bay City could be seen in the distance. "It's open! It's open!" At this moment, the reverse halberd dragon roared as tears flowed out of his huge eyes. It had been thousands of years. They finally saw what the outside world looked like. Although there had been a huge change since thousands of years ago, it was still the outside world. Their hometown, the Xianyang Great World. Hold on. At this moment, a voice was heard. The reverse halberd dragon was about to attack when he heard the voice. He said respectfully, "What can I do for you, Master Yang?" The reverse halberd dragon was now completely convinced by Tianyang. Not only the reverse halberd dragon, but also the emperor crocodile, deep-sea ape, sea dragon leopard, and other great demons. They were even more respectful than before. "After you leave, I don't care where you go. However, it's best that you don't stay in the East Sea State, East Sky State, or East Profound State," Tianyang said calmly. They were a group of great demons, and their hands were stained with blood. If they were not suppressed, who knew what kind of disaster they would cause? Also, it's best that you all return to your own homes. If I find out that one of you has caused a bloodbath, then don't blame me for killing all of you," Tianyang said coldly. His voice was devoid of any warmth, as if it came from the underworld. A murderous aura permeated the surrounding air. Hearing this, the group of great demons and even the human, Wu Zun, were slightly stunned. Why had they not seen Master Yang being so powerful before? Yes, The reverse halberd dragon was the first to speak. If I go against Master Yang's wishes, I'd rather be struck by lightning. The group of great demons seemed to have woken up from a dream as they spoke one after another. All right, Tianyang chuckled and opened the spatial door completely. Chapter 973. After everyone left, the space gate leading to the Vientiane Sky Market became smaller and smaller. Finally, it closed and disappeared into thin air. Some people lamented that they had narrowly escaped death this time. Some regretted not finding the exit of the Spirit Source Sea in the beginning and entering to obtain the treasures. Some people were determined to continue exploring the Vientiane Sky ruins in the future. The treasures in the Sky Market were never something that could be completely explored in one go. Although Tianyang had explored the Sky ruins alone for a while, it had only been about 10 minutes. 10 minutes or so. At most, he could only roughly scan through the place and obtain some obvious treasures. The truly powerful treasures would not be placed outside so openly. In other words, they still had a chance. However, even Chen Bufan, who had the strongest cultivation among them, did not notice it. The space door was not closed. Instead, it turned into a space mark smaller than a grain of sand and flew into Tianyang's hand and entered Tianyang's body. This space mark was the door to the Vientiane Sky ruins. Just like the Earth Emperor's spiritual herb garden, the Vientiane Sky ruins stayed with Tianyang. Well then, everyone, let's part ways here, Chen Bufan said with a smile. Seeing this, everyone understood that Master Yang was going to the Eastern Shin State. Some of the disciples from the Eastern Shin State did not feel too reluctant. However, the people from the Eastern Sea State and the Eastern Sky State were extremely reluctant. Until now, they had not even spoken to Tianyang, let alone befriending him. They sighed helplessly and could only accept the fact that they had missed an opportunity to befriend a peerless genius. By the way, Master Yang, do you have any businesses in the Eastern Sea State that you need help with? Chen Bufan asked. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up, especially the people from the Eastern Sea State. They had secretly made up their minds that if there were any, they would be in the best geographical location in the Eastern Sea State. If they had a good relationship with Master Yang's businesses, they would not be afraid of having a bad relationship with Tianyang. No, Tianyang shook his head. He had only been in the Xintian world for a few months. Foundation, my ass. It's just that the Liu family in Jiangbei City takes good care of me. Jiangbei City, Liu clan. Understood. I'll take care of them. Everyone was a little disappointed that the Tianyang was only taking care of him and not his own forces. However, taking care of her wasn't a bad idea either. At least, she could still talk to Tianyang. Grandmaster Yang, now that you have nothing to worry about in the EC state, let's set off. Chen Bufan smiled. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded slightly. Afterward, Chen Bufan took out a magic boat that was as big as the defiant halberd dragon from his interspatial bag and placed it in the air. The speed of this headwind boat is extremely fast. If we travel at full speed, we will be able to reach Longevity City in less than half a day. Grandmaster Yang, do you have your own magic artifact, or will you take our headwind boat? Chen Bufan asked eagerly, as if he valued Tianyang more than himself. Seeing this, Tianyang understood that this guy must have a favor to ask of him. However, so be it. He still wanted to use the immortal level as a springboard to reach a higher level. My magic artifact shouldn't be as fast as your headwind boat. That'll be troublesome, Tianyang said. Hearing this, Chen Bufan was overjoyed. It's no trouble at all. Grandmaster Yang, please. After that, Chen Bufan led Tianyang onto the headwind boat. Tianyang looked at Chen Bufan with a half smile. Although my strength is not bad and my talent is not bad, an immortal level cultivator shouldn't value me so much, right? You came to help me out. Every word you said was to give me face, as if you were afraid that I would turn around and leave. Don't worry. Now that I'm on your boat, I won't leave. If you have anything to say, just say it openly. Tianyang chuckled. Hearing this, Chen Bufan was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly. It seems that I'm still too obvious? Even such a young boy can see through it at a glance. Too obvious? It was so obvious that it was exploding. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Although Tianyang saved Chen Bufan's life, Chen Bufan would never treat Tianyang like that. It was as if he was not treating his savior, but his savior. It's like this. Chen Bufan smiled bitterly. I'm the master of the immortal level, and I'm in seclusion to break through to the divine path. As for the immortal level, I need an agent, a leader. Naturally, the elders will take care of the affairs. However, the leader can't be an elder. He can only be chosen from the younger generation. Chen Bufan smiled bitterly. Of course, I was chosen. However, there are other young geniuses who are not much weaker than me. In order to win, I need to find a powerful and talented external aid. This is also the purpose of my trip to the Vientiane Sky ruins. Chen Bufan said. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded slightly. This was an extremely common method, choosing the successor of a large force. Even if there was still a long way to go before the succession, there would still be a test. Strength was important, but as the leader of a large force, other talents were also needed. Recruiting talents was one of them. In other words, you purposely released the information to recruit talents? Tianyang suddenly thought of something and asked. Hearing this, Chen Bufan was stunned. Then he nodded. Yes, but it doesn't seem to be of much use. Nonsense. Tianyang sneered. Telling a secret to one person would be a kindness, but telling 100 people would be a fool. If you let him share the same information, he would definitely treat you as a good brother. If you shared it with 100 people, it would be equivalent to telling the whole world. Who would be grateful for your kindness? Then what do I have to do? Tianyang shrugged. Of course, you have to pay me well to recruit me. Otherwise, don't blame me for leaving the moment I entered Dongxian Prefecture. Hearing this, Chen Bufan was slightly stunned. Then, a ray of light burst out from his eyes. You are. Tianyang's talent was something that Chen Bufan had never seen before. He could defeat hundreds of Chen Bufan. If there was such a person in charge, how could Xue Qian and Hua Xiushan have the confidence to fight against him? I didn't agree, and I didn't ask you to reply immediately. Tianyang said indifferently. I need to find out more before I know if you're trying to trick me or not. Hearing this, Chen Bufan was embarrassed. How is that possible? At this moment, the headwind boat suddenly shook. Chen Bufan raised his head and looked at the mountains and rivers in front of him. We have arrived at Dongxian Prefecture. Tianyang, on the other hand, narrowed his eyes. Chapter 974. What's here? Chen Bufan was taken aback. They were in the middle of nowhere. What else could there be other than the river that represented the border between the Eastern Sea and Eastern Xian Prefecture? He had never heard of any powerful demonic beasts in the vicinity. Look ahead. Use more force. Tianyang chuckled. Hearing this, Chen Bufan also looked ahead with a puzzled expression. In the next moment, Chen Bufan's expression changed drastically. His arms trembled as he stared ahead in disbelief. Several small black dots suddenly appeared in the sky. They grew larger at a speed visible to the naked eye. It's the 18 bandits of Yunling. Why are they here? Isn't the territory of the 18 bandits of Yunling the barbaric mountain range in the middle of the Eastern Xian Prefecture? The spiritual energy at the border of the Eastern Xian Prefecture is far inferior to that at the center of the Eastern Xian Prefecture. Why are they here? Chen Bufan's body trembled as he spoke, and he almost fell over. Beside him, Wu Zun's old servant, who was at the peak of the first heaven realm, was also livid. He stared at the black dots that grew larger and larger. To be precise, there were 4 figures and 4 flying demonic beasts beneath them. The 18 bandits of Yunling. Tianyang raised an eyebrow. Judging from the name, they don't seem weak. They're not just weak. Chen Bufan spoke weakly as if all his energy had been sucked out of him. The 18 bandits of Yunling, although they're called bandits, each one of them is a super expert who can dominate an entire prefecture. Even the weakest bandit is as strong as Uncle Guan. The strongest one has even cultivated to the peak of the 6th heaven realm, Wu Zun. Chen Bufan said. Tianyang narrowed his eyes. It was fine if Wu Zun was at the peak of the 1st heaven realm, but he had Wu Zun at the peak of the 6th heaven realm as his backer. What was he doing here? Given the strength of the leaders of the 18 bandits of Cloud Ridge, it's entirely possible for them to establish their own sect, recruit disciples, and nurture an extremely powerful faction in the Eastern Profound Province. However, that first head's temperament is very strange. He did not want the glory, splendor, and wealth after establishing a sect. Instead, he gathered a group of bandits. Chen Bufan's face was pale. Now, 4 of the 18 bandits of Yunling have made their move. This time, the 18 bandits of Yunling are going to eliminate them completely. Qianyang's expression froze when he heard this. If it was Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the 6th stage of the martial arts realm, Tianyang would have no choice but to use the power of Shintian Wuzun and unleash the same sword strike that killed the projection of the great Lord of Heaven. Moreover, he might not succeed. At most, he would be able to force that person to retreat so that he could escape. However, Chen Bufan and the others, as well as the Headwind Boat, would not be able to protect themselves. Young Master, the first head of the 18 bandits of Yunling usually does not make a move. If it's only the last few bandits, we can still deal with them. Uncle Guan, who was at the peak of the 1st stage of the martial arts realm, spoke up like an old servant of Wuzun. Chen Bufan's body trembled when he heard this. Then, he looked at the 4 figures in the sky, whose silhouettes could already be seen clearly. The 4 figures were Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the 1st stage of the martial arts realm, Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the 2nd stage of the martial arts realm, and Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the 3rd stage of the martial arts realm. The demonic beasts under them were also at the peak of the ascension realm, the eagle-winged fiery lion. You guys on this boat, the 18 bandits of Yunling, are here. Why aren't you coming out to greet us? At this moment, an extremely arrogant voice came from one of them. Chen Bufan and Uncle Guan quickly arrived on the deck of the Headwind Boat. When they saw that Wu Zun was at the peak of the 3rd stage of the martial arts realm, the 2 of them despaired. The 7th head of the 18 bandits of Yunling? What is he doing here? Chen Bufan muttered. At this moment, a cold laugh was heard. There's someone here? It's good that there's someone here. Hand over 10 million Reiki, 10 supreme-grade spiritual weapons, and a half-saint weapon, and I'll spare your lives. The 18 bandits of Yunling were all powerful cultivators. However, due to their violent nature, they had no interest in cultivating peacefully. Instead, they were most comfortable with the lowly occupation that cultivators hated the most, being a bandit. What was a bandit? They forcefully stole your things and might even kill you. Not only did it satisfy their thirst for resources as cultivators, but it also satisfied their thirst for blood. The 18 bandits of Yunling had only risen to power 7 or 8 years ago. However, during these 7 or 8 years, countless forces had sent troops to surround and annihilate them, but the 18 bandits of Yunling had escaped. After escaping, the 18 bandits of Yunling had not weakened. Instead, they had become even stronger and had directly destroyed the self-proclaimed righteous sect. Instantly, the entire Eastern Xian state knew of the 18 bandits of Yunling. When they saw the 18 bandits of Yunling, they had to hand over all their belongings. Otherwise, their entire family would be wiped out. 10 million Reiki, 10 supreme-grade spiritual weapons, and a half-saint weapon? Every word that Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the 1st stage of the martial arts realm, uttered made Chen Bufan's pupils contract a little. In the end, Chen Bufan could not help but want to fight the person in front of him to the death. 10 million Reiki was almost enough for him to throw in all his resources. 10 supreme-grade spiritual weapons would barely suffice. However, a half-saint weapon? Even if he sold himself, he wouldn't be able to get it. Just as Chen Bufan was about to explode in anger, an old hand pressed down on his shoulder. Then an old voice sounded. I can give you 10 million Reiki and 10 supreme-grade spiritual weapons, but I can't gather a half-saint weapon no matter what. Why don't I give you this Headwind Boat? This Headwind Boat can be used in all kinds of situations. Although its defensive capabilities are not strong, its speed surpasses some of the weaker half-saint weapons. Uncle Guan's attitude was extremely humble. Everyone in the Eastern Xian state knew of the terror of the 18 bandits of Yunling. When they saw the 18 bandits of Yinling rob them, their first thought was not to resist, but to think of a way to get what the 18 bandits of Yinling wanted. It was the same for Uncle Guan now. However, Chen Bufan and Uncle Guan were very puzzled. Although the 18 bandits of Yinling robbed people, they were very reasonable in their prices. Why would they ask for so much today? Moreover, this route was top secret. Only immortal-level cultivators knew about it. How could the 18 bandits of Yinling be so lucky to have caught him? Oh, does that mean your headwind boat is comparable to a half-saint weapon? The peak rank 1 martial honorable laughed. However, in the next instant, his face darkened. However, we want a half-saint weapon, not a half-saint weapon. If you can't fulfill our request, then go to hell. In the next moment, Wu Zun, who was at the peak of Xian state, swooped down at the two of them. At this moment, Chen Bufan finally reacted. They didn't want any treasures at all. They wanted to come from the beginning. Chapter 975. Who is it? Who asked you to come? Chen Bufan roared, his face filled with rage and murderous intent. Since things had come to this point, there was no need to pretend to be a coward anymore. He might as well fight it out with them. In our line of work, we can't reveal our employer's information. Wu Zun laughed loudly. In the next moment, a long flaming spear condensed in his hand and stabbed towards Chen Bufan. Chen Bufan waved his hand, and the long flaming spear turned into waves of fire that scattered in all directions. At this moment, Chen Bufan's pupils contracted. He suddenly realized that the person in front of him had disappeared. You are indeed the flower of the sect. You are so tender. A mocking voice came from behind. In the next moment, a fist landed on Chen Bufan's back. This fist seemed to have a special penetrative power. Chen Bufan's tough body did not seem to have any defensive effect. Instead, this fist disrupted his internal organs and made him feel as if his insides were on fire. Young master, when Uncle Guan saw the situation, he roared and activated his true origin. He then charged towards the peak, rank 1 martial honorable. What right does an old and frail fellow have to fight with me? The rank 1 martial honorable sneered as a huge spear appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it towards Uncle Guan. Uncle Guan spat out blood and retreated a few steps. In the Vientiane sky ruins, he had followed Chen Bufan and kowtowed for 10,000 steps. Although he had not been able to persevere, he had suffered serious injuries. In addition, Tianyang had just unsealed their true yuan and was injured. These two factors had caused Uncle Guan's combat strength to plummet to a terrifying level. Damn it! Chen Bufan's eyes turned red when he saw that Uncle Guan had been pushed back by a single spear strike. He exploded with speed that far surpassed Wu Zun's peak first heaven cultivation and arrived behind that person. Then he punched out violently. Boom! The face of Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the first level, instantly distorted. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and together with his mount, he flew out of the headwind fairy. Wu Zun, Stage 3. The peak rank 1 martial honorable shouted in disbelief. His body flipped a few times in the air before he finally came to a stop. He retrieved a pill from his interspatial bag and consumed it. Only then did his injuries recover for the time being. However, the bones that had been shattered by Chen Bufan's punch would not recover in a short period of time. I didn't expect you to reach the 3rd tier of Wu Zun realm at such a young age. At this moment, the other two also revealed astonished expressions. Then, this surprise turned into a raging fire of jealousy. Why would they rather be bandits than disciples of a sect? Other than the eccentric first head of the 18 bandits of Cloud Ridge, the others had joined the 18 bandits of Cloud Ridge because they were unable to enter the sect or had committed heinous crimes. They had led a wandering life and lacked resources. After joining the 18 bandits of Cloud Ridge, their situation had improved. However, compared to the genius disciples of the sect, they were still far behind. Now that they saw that Chen Bufan was much younger than them and had a cultivation base that far surpassed theirs, they were enraged. How could they not be envious and furious? Kill him! Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the 2nd tier of the 2nd level, roared and charged towards Chen Bufan. The other Wu Zun, who was at the 2nd tier of the 2nd level, abandoned his mount. His figure merged into the shadows and moved stealthily towards Chun Bufan. One in the light and one in the dark, a double kill. Chun Bufan was previously controlled by the demonic aura and was not in his best condition. Faced with this level of attack, there was only one word for him: death. Where is Master Yang? Just as Chun Bufan was about to unleash his true origin and fight to the death with someone, Chun Bufan's face was filled with anxiety. Now, only Tianyang, who had displayed his invincible power in the Vientiane Sky ruins and suppressed the illusory fiend ancient book, could break out of this predicament. Die! At this moment, a furious roar rang in Chun Bufan's ears. Chun Bufan's face turned pale. He could block the attack in front of him, but he did not have the time to sense the assassination in the shadows. Although the attack from both sides might not be able to take his life this time. However, if it happened a few more times, even if he had the cultivation base of the third tier of the Wuzun realm, he would definitely die. Boom! Right at that moment, a roar that was even louder than the roar of a rank 2 martial honorable rang in Chun Bufan's ears. Chun Bufan's ears were almost deafened. However, he was not angry at all. Instead, he looked to the side with incomparable surprise. Master Yang, you're finally here. If you still didn't come, the rich man would have been killed. Tianyang laughed softly and retracted his hand. In his hand were pieces of blood, bone fragments, and brain matter that had been blocked by his true origin and were slowly falling to the ground. As for Wu Zun, who had tried to assassinate Chun Bufan previously, he had already been killed by the second tier of the Wuzun realm. Tianyang's divine fist of the Dragon Emperor, which had been charging up for a long time, had pierced through his head and exploded on the deck. Without even looking, it was clear that this person would definitely die. 13th brother. At this moment, Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the second tier of the Wuzun realm, shrieked. Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the second tier of the Wuzun realm, had blood-red killing intent in his eyes and a thick sense of hatred. His 13th brother had joined the 18 bandits of Yunling together with him. At that time, the 18 bandits of Yunling only had 11 bandits. He was the 12th, and the one whose head had been destroyed by Tianyang was the 13th. The two of them had gone through countless trials and tribulations together, and they were existences that could trust each other with their backs. However, Tianyang had destroyed him with a single punch. I'll kill you! Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the second tier of the Wuzun realm, roared. A flaming spear condensed in his hand, and he viciously stabbed it at Tianyang. A fire dragon condensed on the spear, broke through space, and arrived in front of Tianyang. Since you're already in this line of work, you should be prepared to be killed at any time, anywhere. Tianyang spoke indifferently. He did not care who this dead guy was to the people in front of him. Brothers? Companions? Relatives? It did not matter. How many brothers, companions, lovers, and relatives had been destroyed by this group of people? Of course, the most important point was, they had provoked Tianyang. Then they would definitely die. Even a grain of rice dares to shine. Looking at the flaming dragon condensed from the spear light, Tianyang smiled disdainfully. On his body, 2 ancestral dragon tattoos lit up, and the power of 2 divine dragon bodies of Wu Zun realm erupted. In the next moment, it condensed on Tianyang's fist, and he punched out. Exploding space. Dragon Emperor Divine Fist. Countless dragons tore through space, letting out ferocious and ear-piercing roars, and viciously tore apart the fire dragon. Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the second tier of the Wuzun realm, was about to flee. Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the third tier of the Yunling 18 bandits, was about to attack. However, who could be faster than the Dragon Emperor Divine Fist? In the next second, the countless dragons shattered Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the second tier of the Wuzun realm. The remaining Wu Zun, who was at the peak of the first tier of the Wuzun realm, was also affected by the aftershock and turned into a bloody pulp. 30 seconds after Tianyang appeared, the Yunling 18 bandits, the 4 great bandits. Now, only Wuzun realm was left. Chapter 976. It was only 30 seconds. 30 seconds was an extremely short amount of time for any cultivator. In fact, 30 seconds could be consumed with a single thought. However, it was these 30 seconds. The 13th member of the 18 bandits of Yunling had his head pierced by a single punch. The 12th member of the 18 bandits of Yunling had his entire body blasted apart. The 17th member of the 18 bandits of Yunling had his entire body festered and died from the aftershock. In just 30 seconds, out of the 18 bandits of Cloud Ridge, only the 7th master was left. He was a general without an army. You've angered me. At this moment, the 7th head of the 18 bandits of Yunling was completely enraged. Shen Bufan rushed to Tianyang's side and provided Tianyang with information about the person in front of him. The 7th head's real name is Beifeng. He has no surname. He's a thug who escaped from Haitian Prefecture to Dongxian Prefecture. He has at least 100 families and sects under his control. Moreover, he's a complete pervert. Beifeng is different from the rest of the 18 bandits of Yunling. He doesn't crave for blood, and he doesn't even want to look at women. Shen Bufan said quickly. His speed was extremely fast. All of the above was said within a second. Tianyang was curious. If he didn't crave for blood or women, why did he join the 18 bandits of Yunling? However, he likes humans and beasts very much. He doesn't look at humans or beasts, but he does it himself. No matter what species, no matter if it's a human or not, male or female, cultivation, background, or bloodline. As long as Beifeng likes someone, he will immediately make a move. It's the same even if it's a divine beast of a family or sect. Shen Bufan said. Tianyang was stunned when he heard this. What? What kind of person is this? It's normal for him to like women, and it's normal for him to like men. However, why would he like other species? Not only did he like them, but he even did it himself? There are all kinds of strange things in this world. How would weaklings like you know the hobbies of the strong? Only the weak would *CK women. A real man should be like me. There's nothing he can't ride. The 7th head of the 18 robbers of Yunling said disdainfully, Very well. After killing 3 of my brothers, you have a new crime. That is ignorance. For your ignorance, go to hell. 7th head master Beifeng roared. In the next moment, his figure disappeared into thin air. There was no sound, no fluctuation, and no ripples in space. It was like an ordinary person walking, but a normal person would not have such a terrifying killing intent behind Tianyang's back in the next moment. Die. 7th head master Beifeng let out a roar. 2 gloves appeared on his fists at some point in time. On the gloves were extremely sharp dragon fangs with a hint of dragon's might. Dragon tooth gloves. It far surpassed a supreme spiritual weapon and was close to a half-step saint weapon. If the half-step saint dragon fangs were added, the gloves would become a true half-step saint weapon, although it was not a half-step saint weapon yet. In the hands of a peak LV3 Wuzun like Beifeng, it could still unleash a terrifying attack. Boom! Tianyang's expression changed slightly. He instinctively punched back, but the punch sent him flying several feet away. He released the ancestral dragon body in an attempt to suppress the dragon tooth gloves. However, the dragon tooth gloves seemed to have been completely refined. They were indifferent to Tianyang's ancestral dragon's might. I didn't expect you to have such a powerful dragon clan's might. At this moment, 7th head master Beifeng was slightly stunned. Then, an extremely greedy expression appeared on his face. It seems like my dragon tooth gloves can be strengthened again. Beast King Sky, shattering hammer. Beifeng roared. The true origin in his body was as vast as a river. Wuzun's true origin was released. The terrifying might almost suppress the entire world. At this moment, Tianyang made his move. Without hesitation, he struck with his sword. The great void sword embryo appeared. The sky sword attached to his body. Then, he struck with his sword. Holy martial art, 10,000 swords in origin. Boom! The Beast King Sky Shattering Hammer was an upper-grade heaven-class martial skill that Beifeng obtained by chance when he was escaping. It was close to being a peerless martial skill. For some reason, Beifeng instantly comprehended the Beast King's intent, which was the most difficult to comprehend in the Beast King sky-shattering hammer. At this moment, he circulated Wu Zun's true origin and performed this punch. Its power was close to a peerless heaven-class martial skill, like 10,000 swords in origin. Boom, 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 boom. Suddenly, there were bursts of sparks on Beifeng's fist. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. He immediately withdrew his sword and performed the 10,000 movement technique. Suddenly, Tianyang's figure appeared in another place. Trying to run? Seeing this, Beifeng's expression suddenly darkened. Then, he revealed a ferocious expression. Even if you want to run, can you escape? Beast King evading shadow step. That's right, at that time, Beifeng had obtained the complete inheritance of this Beast King, Wu Zun's 7th level martial artist. The speed of the evading shadow step was extremely terrifying. In just an instant, Tianyang's 10,000 movement technique was caught up. Beifeng punched out with the Beast King's sky-shattering hammer again. Boom! Tianyang didn't continue fighting. After swinging his sword to block Beifeng's punch, he retreated explosively again. Roar! Don't think of running. Beifeng roared angrily and performed the Beast King evading shadow step again to chase after him. However, he didn't notice that the place where Tianyang stood earlier had left behind a very shallow but indelible purplish-black airflow. Tianyang dodged and swung his sword to force Beifeng back. Then he executed his movement technique to escape. Beifeng roared angrily and repeatedly executed heaven-class martial skills to chase after Tianyang. He could feel that the true origin in his body was rapidly being consumed because he continuously executed heaven-class martial skills. However, he couldn't feel that Tianyang in front of him had the slightest trace of exhaustion. What the hell is going on? Beifeng was shocked. Then, he roared angrily, "Brat, do you only know how to run? If you have the ability, then fight me head-on." "All right." Tianyang suddenly stood still, smiled slightly, and slashed out with the great void sword embryo in his hand. "Umph, you actually dare to fight me head-on. You're dead meat." Beifeng sneered and punched out. Boom! Without any suspense, Tianyang's body directly exploded. What's going on? Beifeng instantly sensed that something was wrong. Previously, this brat could still use various techniques to contend with him for a while. Why was it so easy for him to be beaten up now? Have you heard of a saying? Why sleep for so long when you're alive? After you die, you'll naturally sleep forever. At this moment, a voice that seemed to come from all directions, from the sky to the ground, came over. Beifeng instantly reacted. He had fallen into a trap. So what if I've heard of it? Beifeng snorted coldly. At this moment, Tianyang chuckled and his voice sounded again. Looking at you, you probably haven't had a good night's sleep for decades. Since you've already met the condition of why sleep for so long, then I think I can also send you sleep forever here. What? Beifeng's expression changed drastically. He frantically activated his cultivation technique and rushed toward the wall. However, it was useless. Beifeng was bounced back. Although the wall was destroyed, the wall behind, it was still the same wall. It was still the same cabin. This is my first time using the Illusion Fiend ancient book, so I'm a little unfamiliar with it. If I didn't give you a quick death, then please forgive me. Chapter 977. Boom! With a loud explosion, the place where Beifeng was standing was instantly covered by layers of purplish-black fog that could blind any clairvoyant. This fog wasn't demonic chi, but a strange power of illusion that was automatically produced after true essence was injected into the illusory Fiend ancient book. It had a trace of demonic chi, but its source was still true essence. Damn it! You want to kill me? Not so easy. At this moment, Beifeng howled at the sky. His muscles bulged, and his entire body grew dozens of centimeters in an instant. His robes were also torn apart by this sudden change in his body. In the next moment, layers of grayish-white fur suddenly grew on Beifeng's body. From head to toe, the fur was uneven, as if he had transformed into a werewolf. Beast King's limitless art. Beifong roared. In the next moment, his legs kicked off the ground, exploding with astonishing jumping power as he viciously charged toward the wall. So what if it's an illusion? With my brute strength, I can break through all illusions. The dragon tooth gauntlets flickered with resplendent light as Beifong punched the new wall that had appeared again. Boom! The wall exploded, but another wall that looked almost exactly the same appeared in its place. Beifong seemed to be tireless. The fur on his body madly absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, gathering it on his fists as he charged, smashed, and charged again. However, Tianyong only shook his head when he saw this from outside. I have some ideas, but this is the myriad phenomenon Saint's illusory loop formation. How can it be broken by such a stupid method? Tianyong chuckled. Even Beifong himself didn't realize that his sense of direction had long been confused by the layers of fog in the illusion formation. Every time, he thought that he was sprinting forward in a straight line. In reality, Beifong's feet would unconsciously deviate from the direction he took every 2 steps. He had smashed so many walls, but in reality, he was just going in circles. How can there be so many? This headwind boat is only so big at most. How can there be so many walls? Within the illusion formation, Beifong was completely enraged. He punched wildly with both fists, smashing wall after wall. However, no matter how many walls were broken, only the exact same walls would appear again. TSK Tisk, I'll give you a quick death. Tianyong clicked his tongue. This guy should have broken through thousands of walls. A normal person would have sensed that something was wrong with this place, but Beifong was still stubbornly fighting. Tianyong couldn't stand it anymore. A layer of purple light appeared on the fantasy magic ancient book in his hand. Then, Beifong, who was in the array formation, suddenly felt that his surroundings had changed. Previously, it was just a simple illusion array. Now, after transforming into a werewolf, Beifong's senses had reached a terrifying degree. In just an instant, he sensed this additional killing intent. Damn it! Beifong roared angrily and retracted his hand. He knew that it would be useless even if he continued to shatter it. It would be better to clash with Tianyong's next move. He wanted to let him know that the 7th head of the 18 bandits of Yunling wasn't someone who could be easily dealt with. Phantasmal heavenly sound wave. Tianyong chuckled. The fantasy magic ancient book suddenly trembled, and a rolling sound wave resounded in the illusion array. At the same time, Tianyong also injected a trace of Wu Zun's primordial spirit power into it, strengthening the already powerful, phantasmal heavenly sound wave. What's this? It had just sounded and didn't have much lethality. Even Beifong, who was in the middle of it, was stunned. He looked disdainful. You want to deal with this lullaby, like sound wave? Oof, break. A shocking aura suddenly bloomed from Beifong's body, spreading in all directions. That aura actually turned into 8 sharp air blades, directly cutting through the surrounding walls. However, it was useless. When he used the phantasmal heavenly sound wave, the illusion array that he had set up before was not weakened at all. Seeing this, Beifong's expression suddenly turned ugly. Now, it seemed that Tianyong couldn't do anything to him. However, he couldn't do anything to Tianyong either. If this dragged on, the immortal-level disciple would call the immortal-level powerhouses over. He would probably die here like number 12, number 23, and number 17. Young man, why don't we negotiate? Just as Beifong opened his mouth, the phantasmal heavenly sound wave that he had ignored all this time suddenly exploded. The rolling sound wave was like a solid substance, ruthlessly smashing into his head. In the next moment, the phantasmal heavenly sound wave and Tianyong's primordial spirit power were like the sharpest dagger in the world, ruthlessly piercing into Beifong's glabella and into his soul ocean. Ah! Beifong instantly knelt on one knee and howled crazily. He even dispelled his werewolf form, hoping that his hearing would be reduced a little. However, it was useless. Even if Beifong pierced his eardrums, it would be useless. The phantasmal heavenly sound wave's strongest and most important part was its soul killer move. Damn it! Damn it! Beifeng supported himself with both hands on the ground, forcing himself not to fall. However, his hands were still trembling nonstop. Bang! Finally, Beifeng couldn't take it anymore, and both his knees fell to the ground. Stronger. Seeing this, Tianyang was expressionless. With a flick of his finger, the phantasmal heavenly tome lit up with a purple light again. Ah! Beifeng howled crazily, but he didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Instead, he fell to the ground, his soul already severely injured. You're really going to hibernate. Forget it. I accidentally killed Wu Zun previously. Now Chen Bufan is probably going to question me, so I'll spare your life first. Tianyang looked at Beifeng's listless eyes, his soul on the verge of being destroyed, and muttered to himself, with a flick of his finger. The purplish-black airflow that shrouded the entire cabin was immediately absorbed into the phantasmal heavenly tome. The illusory array that Tianyang set up also disappeared without a trace. As for the surrounding cabins, Beifeng used all his strength to smash thousands of walls. Now he was still standing in the same place, unharmed. Seeing this, Beifeng's pupils suddenly shrank. From the beginning to the end, he couldn't even cause the slightest bit of damage to this illusory array. How powerful was this illusory array? Master Yang, how is it? At this moment, Chen Bufan hurried over and rushed into the cabin. Seeing Beifeng on the ground, bloodless and on the verge of death, his pupils shrank instantly. This is Beifeng, the 7th leader of the 18 bandits of Yunling. He's right here. Ask whatever you have to say. Tianyang said indifferently, although the 18 bandits of Yunling didn't come for him. But no matter what, he still made a move against Tianyang. Tianyang and the person behind this hadn't even met yet, but there was already a grudge between them. Who sent you here? Shueqian, Huaxiu Shun, or Canghai sect? Chen Bufan asked anxiously. Hearing this, Beifeng gritted his teeth and sneered. It's good to tell you. That person deserves to be dealt with by you for making me fall here. If it weren't for the fact that I couldn't cultivate the Beast King's limitless technique to the evil dragon realm, how could I be dealt with by you guys? If I die, that person won't have it easy either. That person is... Before Beifeng finished speaking, his body suddenly released rays of terrifying light. In the next moment, Beifeng's pupils shrank as he looked at his body in disbelief. At this moment, his body was completely out of his control. It was heading toward self-destruction. Bastard! Beifeng roared angrily, and in the next moment, it turned into sorrow. I didn't expect that person to have so many tricks up his sleeve. Goodbye, little cloud lion. Goodbye, little flood dragon. Immortality realm. Chapter 978. Self-destruct. Even Tianyang, Chen Bufan, and the old servant Uncle Guan, who had just arrived, did not expect the person behind this to be so ruthless. When Beifeng was about to say his name, he immediately activated a seal that had been hidden in his body at some unknown time. If Beifeng hadn't reacted quickly enough and changed his words at the last moment, he wouldn't even have had the time to recover. Even so, Beifeng was still dead. Immortality realm. His angry roar before his death was like a ghost's final cry that lingered in everyone's ears. Immortality realm? Tianyang raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Chen Bufan thoughtfully. Looks like your family's power is not peaceful either. Damn it. Chen Bufan was already gritting his teeth and his face was filled with rage. The reason why he asked about the Canghai sect was because he still had a glimmer of hope that someone from the same sect would not be so ruthless. Those who knew about his trip to the Vientiane Sky ruins, other than those in the immortality realm, were only a few other cultivators. The only person who could order the 18 bandits of Yunling to stop him was the 14th elder of the Canghai sect. However, Chen Bufan was wrong. It was not the 14th elder of the Canghai sect at all, nor was it the Canghai sect. The enemy came from within, from the same sect. It's just a position as a leader. It's hard to say whether he can really become the sect master. How could he be so ruthless? Chen Bufan muttered to himself as if he had suffered a huge blow. Only those in the immortality realm or the higher levels of the immortality realm knew about my trip to the Vientiane Sky ruins. The way back was also extremely secretive. No one except the same sect members would know about it. However, the 18 bandits of Yunling still came. They were not just passing by, they were targeting us from the start. Chen Bufan stood there in a daze. Beifeng's self-destruction did not cause much damage, other than destroying the wall. Even Chen Bufan, who was close by, was not hurt. After all, this was a restriction, and one that had been secretly placed. Beifeng wasn't a fool. If the restrictions were too powerful, Beifeng would definitely know. However, this was not mercy to his fellow disciples. Thinking of this, Chen Bufan stood there in a daze, as if he had lost his mind. Good, good, good. Originally, Chen Bufan, didn't really want to fight for the position of agent and the position of future Realm Lord. However, you have truly angered me. Chen Bufan looked up to the sky and howled. The next moment, he looked at Tianyang with a sincere expression. 90 degrees, a bow. Grandmaster Yang, please lend me a hand. If I succeed in the future, I, Chen Bufan, will do my best to satisfy Grandmaster Yang's needs. Previously, when Tianyang asked for remuneration, Tianyang did not let him say it. Chen Bufan still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. However, now that he was overwhelmed with emotions, that hope had completely disappeared. No matter what Tianyang wanted, Chen Bufan, would get it to him. Now, he only wanted revenge. All right. Seeing this, Tianyang smiled slightly and helped Chen Bufan up. This guy almost killed me. Even if he didn't say anything, I would have to deal with him. Hearing this, Chen Bufan looked at Tianyang with gratitude and nodded heavily. Then he used his inner yuan to completely remove the bloodstains on the headwind boat. On the other hand, Uncle Guan looked at Chen Bufan with a gratified expression. Chen Bufan's father, Chen Beifan, was the Immortality Realm Lord decades ago and had reached the Half-Saint Realm. However, he died when he was in seclusion to break through to the Saint Realm. At that time, Chen Bufan was only 4 or 5 years old and could not take on such a big responsibility. Thus, he let Chen Beifan's sworn brother in the Immortality Realm act as the Realm Lord. That person was Hua Xiushen's father. After ascending to the Realm Lord's throne, the new Realm Lord suddenly turned his back on Chen Bufan. He didn't treat Chen Bufan well at all, and even communicated with the elders to kick Chen Bufan out of the longevity sect. As a result, Chen Bufan, the son of the former Realm Lord, was treated far worse than Zhao Haikong. He only had an old servant by his side. Both of his parents had died, and he had encountered a great disaster. Chen Bufan had done his best to restore his previous status and made many good friends. He thought that these good friends were different from the Realm Lord, but the reality had fiercely slapped him awake. In the face of benefits, friends? What were they? Young master, you've grown up. Uncle Guan smiled gratifyingly as he watched Chen Bufan quietly return to his room to cultivate, as if he was not affected by the situation. He looked at Tianyang with a look of deep gratitude. The Immortality Realm was the overlord of the southern part of the Dongxin Prefecture. Under the jurisdiction of an immortal level, there were many famous big cities. Apart from the Longevity City, there was one big city that specialized in alchemy. It was the largest. That is the Immortality Realm, second only to the Longevity City, Dansinaville. In the sky above Dansinaville, on a spiritual boat, Chen Bufan proudly introduced the huge city below to Tianyang. The city was huge, much bigger than Jiangbei City. At the same time, in the center of Dansinaville, there was a tall tower that reached into the clouds. It was even higher than where Tianyang was now. At the top of the tower was a perfectly round pill that represented the alchemy of Dansinaville. Master Yang, I need to make a trip to Dansinaville to buy some healing pills and return to the Immortality Realm in the best condition. Will you be on the headwind boat or with us? Chen Bufan said respectfully. At this moment, the headwind boat was nearing Dansinaville and slowly descending. Dansinaville was the second largest city in the south of the Dongxin Prefecture. It was absolutely forbidden to fly there. Even if he was an Immortality Realm cultivator, he could not act presumptuously in Dansinaville. After all, compared to the Longevity City, where there were almost only immortality realm cultivators and those under their jurisdiction, Danseineville was more complicated. Alchemists from all over the Shintian Great World would gather here. Danseineville was not only a city, but also the holy land of alchemy in the east of the Shintian Great World. "I'll pass. I don't have anything to buy," Tianyong said faintly. Although he cultivated alchemy, he was not very interested in Danseineville. After all, it was just SOSO. Tianyong had now broken through the 6th grade and successfully reached the 7th grade. If he continued to improve with Tianyong's 3 sacred paths, it was almost certain that he would become a minor saint alchemist. What do you want of a minor saint and saint alchemists? He did not think that Danseineville would have someone of that level. A minor saint alchemist was equivalent to a half-saint. A half-saint was the top almighty in the Dongshin prefecture. A saint alchemist was an existence that even a saint would have to treat with respect. If there was one here, then all the alchemists in the Dongshin prefecture would have to come. Obviously, there was none. All right, Qin Bufan sighed when he did not get the reply he wanted, but he still mustered his spirits. "Uncle Guan, let's go." Chapter 979. Tianyong sat quietly in the room. The headwind boat was indeed a spiritual boat that even Qin Bufan valued highly. Not only was it fast, but its defensive power and the concentration of spiritual qi of heaven and earth were also extraordinary. Apart from its lack of attack power, it could probably destroy all the supreme-grade spiritual weapons on the market. The previous experiment was successful. Even if I don't use the sky-devouring secret skill, the secret skill of 7 stars, and the ancestral dragon body, my strength is more than enough to deal with Wu Zun at the peak of LV2 realm. After that, the speed of the ancestral dragon body soared to the extreme. Even if I don't use the sky-devouring secret skill and the secret skill of 7 stars, I can still deal with Wu Zun at the peak of LV3 realm. With the power of the illusion fiend ancient book, I almost killed him. Tianyong smiled slightly. Previously, he had the ability to use his trump card to kill Bei Feng, but he didn't. As his strength increased, the effect of the sky-devouring secret skill on Tianyong would become weaker and weaker. Now, Tianyong had to use the sky-devouring secret skill whenever he encountered a powerful enemy. In this way, Tianyong had to bear the problem of his strength becoming weaker and weaker before his sky cloud sword broke through to the sacred martial soul. Therefore, Tianyong had to take a gamble. With his current strength and Wu Zun's LV2 realm cultivation, could he fight against Wu Zun at the peak of LV3 realm? The facts proved that he had made the right bet. Although luck played a large role in this, luck was also a part of one's strength. Being able to kill Bei Feng had already proved that Tianyong's strength was terrifyingly strong. At that time, I hadn't used the perforation of heaven and earth. If I had, I might have been able to kill Bei Feng even faster. Therefore, my strength should be at the peak of Wu Zun's LV3 realm, or even close to Wu Zun's LV4 realm. Tianyong muttered to himself. Then, he closed his eyes and was about to cultivate. Qin Bufan and Wu Zun were going to buy some elixirs and would probably be back soon. Tianyong decided to cultivate in the headwind boat. Just as Tianyong closed his eyes, a voice rang out. An aged exclamation could be heard all of a sudden. "Grandmaster Yang! Master Yang! Bad news!" It was Uncle Guan. Tianyong raised his eyebrows, stood up, and looked out of the headwind boat. Uncle Guan's legs alternated wildly. Even though he was on the ground, his speed was not any slower than flying. In the next moment, Uncle Guan arrived in front of Tianyong. "What is it?" Seeing how anxious Uncle Guan was, Tianyong's expression changed slightly. Weren't they just going to buy medicinal pills? How come it's already over after only an hour? Judging from Uncle Guan's expression, it seemed that it did not end well. "Where's Qin Bufan?" Tianyong asked. Uncle Guan was back. Qin Bufan couldn't be slower than Uncle Guan. However, Tianyong did not see Qin Bufan behind Uncle Guan. Young master has been detained." Uncle Guan was so tired that he was out of breath. His words came out intermittently. Flying was not allowed in Danseineville. They had come to the center of Danseineville. As for the headwind boat, it stopped outside the Alchemy Saint City. In an hour's time, just by running on foot, the total distance was almost the entire Alchemy Saint City. No wonder Uncle Guan was so tired. Even Wu Zun was tired after running at such an extreme speed and not being allowed to fly. Detained, Tianyang's expression changed slightly. What's going on? Does Chun Bufan have a natural disposition to be criticized? Wherever he goes, something bad will happen. I didn't even go with him, but he's still so troublesome. That's right. Uncle Guan breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to speak, Tianyang brought him to Dan Sinaville again. Lead the way. I'll tell you the details on the way. Tianyang said. Chun Bufan was now Tianyang's long-term meal ticket. If Chun Bufan died, Tianyang would be embarrassed. It would be awkward if he died in Dan Sinaville instead of being hunted down by the 18 bandits of Yunling. It's like this. Uncle Guan was carried by Tianyang at a crazy speed. He did not need to exert any strength and immediately spoke. Young Master and I entered Dan Sinaville's sacred tower to buy pills. There's a type of pill that's especially effective for Young Master's injuries. Young Master was just about to buy it. However, a disciple of a powerful organization suddenly appeared and stopped Young Master. The two Wu Zun beside him, who were at the peak of level 2 state, attacked and directly injured Young Master, who was caught off guard. That person is a disciple of Dan Sinaville's sacred tower. Therefore, no one could stop him from attacking in the sacred tower. Uncle Guan said. Hearing this, Tianyang was speechless. He was the son of the previous territorial master of the immortal level. How could he be bullied by a disciple of an organization under his jurisdiction in his own territory? The son of the territorial master was too lousy. After that, that person challenged Young Master to a battle of alchemy. Young Master knew a little about alchemy, so he agreed. However, he was beaten senseless. Now, Young Master has lost the battle and has been captured. I'm here to ask you for help, Uncle Guan said. Hearing this, Tianyang chuckled. Because he's a disciple of Dan Sinaville's sacred tower, no one could stop him? Yes. Uncle Guan nodded, looking puzzled. He did not know why Tianyang suddenly brought this up. At this moment, Tianyang suddenly chuckled. Your Young Master is stupid. He has power, but he doesn't know how to use it. In the next moment, Tianyang used the air step secret skill and soared into the sky. In an instant, his speed increased by several times. Like a shooting star, he rushed toward the sacred tower. Warning, flying is not allowed in Dan Sinaville. Land immediately. In front of Tianyang, an Ascension State Guard of Dan Sinaville shouted. In the next moment, Tianyang flew over his head. A strong gust of wind rose. You didn't listen to my words? The Ascension State Guard was stunned. He was a guard of Dan Sinaville. Since when did someone dare to disrespect Dan Sinaville? At this moment, Tianyang was approaching the sacred tower. If you don't come down, we'll attack. Although they were surprised that Tianyang could withstand the pressure of the anti-flight magical formation, the Dan Sinaville guards were not to be trifled with. In the next moment, they gathered in front of Tianyang. Tianyang, on the other hand, ignored him and sped up again. Master Yang? In his hand, Uncle Guan was trembling in fear. This was Dan Sinaville. I'm an immortal level. Who dares to stop me? Tianyang suddenly roared. Thunder rumbled, resounding through the clouds. Hearing this, the Dan Sinaville guards who had just gathered were stunned. F***CK, an immortal level playboy. Brothers, let's retreat. It's useless to block him. We'll be beaten up later. The leader, Wu Zun, spat on the ground and said in annoyance. An immortal level was the overlord of the southern part of the Dongxian state. It was one of the top forces in the entire Dongxian state. Wu Zun would be stupid to fight an immortal level person. And just like that, Tianyang rushed toward the sacred tower unimpeded. As for Uncle Guan, he was completely stunned. You know what's good for you. Chapter 980. The sacred tower was the towering tower that Tianyang and his group had seen when they were still flying in the air. It was said that the sacred tower was not only the symbol of Dan Sinaville, but also the source of Dan Sinaville's power. Back then, an existence above the Saint State had created the sacred tower of alchemy. At the bottom of the tower was the inheritance of a saint. Of course, these were just legends. Hundreds of thousands of years had passed, and there was no way to verify their authenticity. However, it was undeniable that the Dansoneville's sacred tower had become the strongest alchemy force in Dongxian State, East Sky State, and other eastern states, excluding the Eastern Sky Divine Land. Every disciple among them all had incomparably valiant alchemy cultivation. Master Yang, when the sacred tower was in sight, Tianyang slowed down and descended from the sky. The pilgrims around the sacred tower were stunned as they looked at the two people descending from the sky. Heavens, there were actually people who dared to fly in Dansoneville, and no one stopped them? This won't cause bad rumors for the young master, will it? Uncle Guan was put down by Tianyang, but he still had a lingering fear. It was not a surprise, but a shock. Qin Bufan's image was that of a gentleman. Compared to the Songhai sect, he was more worthy of the title of young master. However, immortal-level cultivators did not use the title of young master, which was why the Songhai sect had snatched it away. However, Qin Bufan was still the most cultured and elegant among them. Even if he had power, he rarely used it. Bad rumors, my ass. Do you think bad rumors are more important, or bad actions? Tianyang smiled disdainfully. Public opinion can melt gold, and accumulation can destroy bones? That's bullshit for the weak. Such methods only work on the weak. If you have the strength, kill everyone who disagrees with you. Let's see how many people will be able to melt gold for you. Your young master is just like you. He's pedantic. Compared to the Songhai sect, he's much worse. Tianyang said. Hearing that, Uncle Guan wanted to refute, but was stopped by Tianyang. Who do you think is more powerful? A giant who has a big knife but doesn't dare to use it, or a weak chicken who only has fists but dares to attack? These words were equivalent to saying it out loud. Hearing this, Uncle Guan was completely speechless. The way he and the young master had conducted themselves for so many years had been directly rejected by Tianyang with a single sentence. However, he couldn't refute it. He didn't even want to refute it, because the truth was just as Tianyang had said. In fact, it was even more terrifying. They weren't just giant men who didn't dare to use their machetes. He was clearly a cultivator who held a magic tool, but had his hands and feet tied. His opponent wasn't a weak chicken that only knew how to play with his fists, but a cultivator who similarly wielded a magic artifact and was unscrupulous in his methods. If he maintained his previous behavior, he would probably still be helping others count the money when he was betrayed. All right, Uncle Guan nodded. In that case, thank you very much, Master Yang. However, we won't be able to be presumptuous in the sacred tower from now on. The sacred tower's strength may not be comparable to that of an immortal-level cultivator, but its influence is extremely terrifying. In the eastern part of the Xintian Great World, apart from the alchemists of the Eastern Divine Continent, most of them admire the sacred tower very much. A considerable number of them have even obtained opportunities in the sacred tower. If the sacred tower gets angry, I'm afraid even an immortal-level cultivator won't be able to withstand it. Uncle Guan said. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded slightly. Although he had just pretended to be a good-for-nothing, he knew when he could act and when he couldn't. If he still acted like a good-for-nothing in the face of an existence like the sacred tower, that would be pure idiocy. Tianyang was just pretending. He wasn't really an idiot. So, where's Qin Bufan now? Tianyang asked. Uncle Guan hurriedly said, He's in the alchemy room on the second floor of the sacred tower. All right, lead the way, Tianyang said. Hearing this, Uncle Guan's face lit up. He immediately walked in front respectfully and led the way for Tianyang. The sacred tower was very tall. Although it looked small and narrow, in reality, one would only know how vast the sacred tower was after stepping in. Just the first floor alone was 10 meters high. The higher one went, the higher the height of each floor. Legend had it that the top of the sacred tower only had one floor. It was the closest to the power of heaven and earth. It was a genuine cultivation paradise. Even the center of the immortal-level cultivation paradise was far inferior to the top of the sacred tower. No one knew why the sacred tower had the effect of attracting the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. No one could explain it clearly. However, One only needed to know that the sacred tower was indeed powerful. Tianyang listened to Uncle Guan's introduction of the sacred tower as he continued to follow him. The first floor of the sacred tower did not require any threshold because there was nothing on the first floor except for the alchemy room. However, the second floor required all kinds of thresholds. For example, the strength of an ascension state, a grade 6 alchemist, or a disciple of a major force. This was because there was another place on the second floor other than the alchemy room that was more advanced. The medicinal materials exchange. Tianyang also wanted to go to the medicinal materials exchange, but now, Chen Bufan's matter was more important. The second floor. Halt, the guard said. At this moment, Uncle Guan immediately released the pressure of Wu Zun's realm. The guard's expression changed slightly and welcomed Uncle Guan in. He did not even check Tianyang's cultivation. What a joke. With Wu Zun's realm strength, he could go to the 5th floor or even higher. What was wrong with bringing someone to the 2nd floor? However, Fu told me that the old Wu Zun's realm would return, but he did not say that he would bring someone with him. Is it that? The guard muttered to himself as he watched Tianyang and Uncle Guan leave. At this moment, Uncle Guan brought Tianyang to the door of the alchemy room where Chen Bufan failed in the alchemy battle. Master Yang, how do you want to solve this? Uncle Guan asked respectfully. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. Do you even need to ask? How did he humiliate Chen Bufan? I'll humiliate him in the same way. Uncle Guan thought that Tianyang would suppress him or reveal his identity so that the young alchemist would take the initiative to let go of him. However, he heard Tianyang's words. It seemed that he was going to refine pills. Master Yang knew alchemy in addition to formations and swordsmanship. For a moment, Uncle Guan was dumbfounded. At this moment, Tianyang also came forward. He stretched out his right hand and pretended to knock on the door. The next moment, Tianyang suddenly kicked with his left leg. Bang! The heavy door was suddenly kicked open by Tianyang. Uncle Guan, who thought that Tianyang had learned to be polite, was dumbfounded. Who is it? Although the person inside wasn't refining pills, the sudden kick of the door had caused the other party to fly into a rage. The next moment, that person saw Uncle Guan behind Tianyang. There was a hint of mockery on his face. I was wondering who it was. It turns out that you brought back reinforcements. Chapter 981. The man did not look at Tianyang at all. Instead, he was looking at Uncle Guan with a face full of sarcasm. Call for reinforcements? Where are the reinforcements? Don't tell me it's this little brat. The man chuckled. Before Uncle Guan could say anything, Chen Bufan, whose true ether was sealed by a special method, shouted in surprise. Master Yang, why are you here? Grandmaster Yang? Hearing this, the man was slightly taken aback. Then he scanned Tianyang from head to toe with a look of contempt. There's no soul aura on your body. Obviously, your soul power is ridiculously weak. You're terrifyingly young. How could someone like you be called a master? Shut up, Chen Bufan said angrily. How can an ant like you measure up to Master Yang's methods? And, hearing that person was immediately enraged. I'm Jin Daoping, an inner disciple of the Holy Tower. I'm only 58 years old, but I'm already a LV3 Ascension Realm Alchemist at the peak of grade 6. Even some of the elite inner disciples are far inferior to me in terms of pill alchemy. If I were to become a Martial Highness one day, then I would definitely become a grade 7 pill master. This brat who doesn't even have the slightest bit of soul power dares to call me an ant? Jin Daoping said angrily, releasing his true ether. His short golden hair kept moving, and his robe fluttered without wind. Peak grade 6 alchemist? Tianyang was slightly taken aback. Are you afraid? Seeing Tianyang's reaction, Jin Daoping sneered. A grade 6 alchemist can scare you like this. I wonder what you'll do if my grade 7 alchemist master shows up. However, it's shocking that I can reach this level at my age. It's normal that you can't believe it. Jin Daoping felt good about himself and said disdainfully. However, Tianyang ignored Jin Daoping. Instead, he looked at Chen Bufan with a strange expression. There was only confusion in his eyes. Why did you pick such a lousy opponent and lose to him? What the hell is Wu Zun doing? Chen Bufan seemed to have understood the meaning in Tianyang's eyes. He looked flustered. Uncle Guan, who was next to him, immediately understood and explained. Grandmaster Yang, young master, cultivates alchemy. He only cultivates occasionally. Now, his cultivation is only at the peak of level 5. Facing a peak rank 6, it's normal to lose. Even with the power of Wu Zun's primordial spirit, it might not be enough to make up for it. Uncle Guan said. Tianyang nodded slightly. That was true. However, the great Wu Zun had actually lost to a reaching heaven state. What a sour feeling, bastard. Listen to me. Seeing that Tianyang didn't put him in his eyes at all, Jean Daoping was instantly enraged. Do you know where we are? Since you've come to the sanctum, you'll have to fight me if you want to take this person away. Otherwise, wait for the forces behind this guy to come and ransom him. Jean Daoping was like a furious lion. His hair stood on end as he roared. Tianyang turned his head and looked at Uncle Guan. By the way, how did Chen Bufan provoke him? He provoked Young Master. Young Master was buying a heaven spiritual bao Xin pill on the second floor. Suddenly, this guy interfered. Because of his identity as a sanctum disciple, it was not good to offend both sides. Therefore, he wanted to challenge Young Master. Young Master accepted, and that's it, Uncle Guan said helplessly. He didn't know what was going on with his Young Master. When the fight started, he couldn't be soft, but when it came to something he wasn't good at, he was arrogant. A sanctum disciple was definitely one of the best in alchemy. Even an outer disciple of the sanctum wasn't enough for a peak rank 5. I see. Tianyang nodded speechlessly. He brought this upon himself. However, this guy actually asked Uncle Guan to call for help. This meant that this guy still wanted to compete in alchemy. Tell me, take him away. What are your conditions? Tianyang said calmly. Hearing this, Jean Daoping's eyebrows twitched. Was he the sanctum disciple, or was this guy the sanctum disciple? His words were so arrogant that it made people feel disgusted. Since this is Danseineville, this is the sanctum. Since this is the sanctum, we naturally have to use the sanctum's most direct method. Alchemy battle. Jean Daoping laughed loudly. No matter how arrogant Tianyang was before, it was useless now. Now that the guy was in his hands, he could do whatever he wanted. As long as they competed in alchemy, this guy who didn't even have the power of the soul would lose without a doubt. Hearing this, Chen Bufan lowered his head in shame. He could forcefully break through, but he didn't have the face to do so. Unlike Tianyang, Chen Bufan was still an idiot who wanted to save face. If it were Tianyang, he would have run away without knowing if his companion was strong enough. Alchemy battle? Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. That's right. Alchemy battle, refining pills. Within 2 hours, whoever can refine the pill with the highest grade and the best quality will be the winner. Of course, I can see that you don't have the power of the soul, and your alchemy cultivation is probably not that great either. This time, I'll give you a handicap of 1 hand. Jean Daoping said arrogantly. Hearing this, Tianyang's expression changed slightly. Then he chuckled. Sure. Uncle Guan, who was beside him, was already furious. If this wasn't the sanctum, he would have attacked long ago. In alchemy, the most important thing was to be completely focused. Putting everything into the alchemy, even the slightest bit of distraction, could lead to serious consequences. Moreover, Jean Daoping gave him a handicap of 1 hand. He didn't care about Tianyang at all. At least you know your place. Tianyang agreed so readily that Jean Daoping was a little surprised, but he still sneered. Coward, he agreed after being ridiculed like this. How little confidence did he have in his own strength? How could such a person compete with him? 2 hours, right? Tianyang suddenly said. Hearing this, Jean Daoping felt a little strange, but he still nodded. That's good. Then Tianyang opened his mouth and suddenly spat out a flame. True flames of destruction. The true flames of destruction suddenly turned into a flaming pill cauldron in midair, and in the next moment, Tianyang's space bag automatically opened. Sky spirit grass, withered tail leaf, dragon heart blood. The herbs for refining the heaven spirit pill suddenly flew out and fell into the flaming pill cauldron. Jean Daoping was stunned. At this moment, Tianyang's primordial spirit moved, and the flaming pill cauldron suddenly turned into 9 fire dragons. 9 dragons, cycle technique. With every blink, countless impurities of the herbs would be burned out by the flames. The extremely destructive and terrifying true flames of destruction was like the most docile kitten under Tianyang's primordial spirit. Before Jean Daoping even took out the pill cauldron, Tianyang had already refined all the herbs. Condense! Tianyang shouted softly, and in the flaming pill cauldron, rays of black light suddenly shone. The essence of the herbs seemed to be crushed by the most terrifying force, and directly fused together. The flames rose, and the pill was condensed. In the next second, the nourishment was over. The Heaven Spirit pill was formed. Okay, hurry up. Tianyang threw the Heaven Spirit treasure Xiancore into a jade bottle, then turned around, found a praying mat, and sat down on it. As for Jean Daoping, he was dumbfounded, and his face was full of shock. As for Uncle Guan, he was completely shocked. Why did Tianyang agree to let Jean Daoping use one hand? Because